Chapter 8:23. Han Shuo did not know what was going on in the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. As per Baum's invitation, he arrived at the City Lord's mansion in Ethereal City. Recently, Han Shuo had been using his demon generals to carefully observe Baum. Other than hearing that Baum had ordered his divine guards to investigate Goldstone Market, Han Shuo did not discover anything unusual. However, that conversation was enough for Han Shuo. He knew that Baum must have ulterior motives for sparing no effort in helping him set up the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy branch in Ethereal City. When Han Shuo arrived at the City Lord's mansion, Baum was receiving him in the parlor. When Baum saw Han Shuo, he very warmly welcomed him and asked if he was satisfied with the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy branch. Han Shuo put on a big smile and pretended to be courteous to Baum for a while. Then, he got straight to the point. "What can I do for you, City Lord? I have a friend who wants to purchase some special medicines from your Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. I wonder if your Celestial Pearl Pharmacy can produce some?" asked Baum after hesitating for a moment. When he saw that Han Shuo had brought up a serious matter, Han Shuo stared blankly for a moment. His demon general had been secretly observing Baum from 100 meters away. According to his demon general's observation, Baum had not met any special friends. Therefore, Han Shuo was rather surprised by Baum's words. After thinking for a moment, Han Shuo recalled that Baum cultivated in the Edict of Space. A divine weapon like the Space Mirror, which was powered by energy crystals, should be easy to produce. As Baum's demon general had to observe Baum from a certain distance, when Baum was cultivating in the gymnasium, Baum's demon general would not be able to detect his movements through boundaries and walls. If Baum had met anyone, it would have been through the Space Mirror. "May I know what kind of special medicines your friend is looking for?" asked Han Shuo smilingly with his brows bunched. "My friend is in the business of hunting magical beasts. Some magical beasts have tough skin and are very hard to deal with. He needs some poisonous medicines." In other divine dominions, using poison potions is a big taboo, but in the Fate and Space dominions, it's not a big deal. If you're interested, we can cooperate. If not, then forget it. I won't force you to do something you don't want to do. Baum's expression was natural and his tone was flat. Poisons were strictly prohibited in the dominions of light and life. Even in the dominions of death, darkness, and destruction, most potion shops wouldn't dare to openly sell poisons. As for those who experimented on using living people to refine poisons, just like god hunters, they were boycotted by all dominions. The more dangerous a field was, the more tempting the profits would be. These two industries were no exception. Poisons were slightly better off. Although some potion shops would not openly display their poisons on the counter, they would still sell some in secret. There were many potion shops that dabbled in this line of business. As long as Han Shuo took care of the relevant affairs in the city, there shouldn't be any major problems. However, those who experimented on living people and specialized in poisons were highly taboo. Although they weren't as notorious as god hunters, they would still be hunted down by divine guards if they were discovered. Therefore, those who dabbled in this line of business absolutely did not dare to expose themselves. Back then, it was because Han Shuo exposed the God Swamp Pharmacy in the City of Shadows that the House of Saint closed it down and executed several of its key members. Han Shuo's brows were bunched even tighter. It wasn't that there weren't any potion shops that specialized in poisons. Why would Baum look for him? As the City Lord of Ethereal City, Baum had specifically sought Han Shuo out to discuss this matter. As long as Han Shuo agreed to it, with Baum as the City Lord, there shouldn't be any problems. What is Baum trying to do? A series of thoughts flashed across Han Shuo's mind. After keeping silent for a moment, Han Shuo suddenly put on a faint smile and said, "This business is risky. I need to meet that friend of yours. I will only consider this matter after I have met that friend of yours and feel that he is trustworthy." Han Shuo initially intended to flatly refuse. However, when he thought about how Baum had spared no effort in helping him, he realized that Baum might be secretly plotting something in this regard. In order to find out the truth, Han Shuo decided to investigate step by step. "Just as you said, this business is risky. I need to ask for his opinion and see if he is willing to meet you." Baum thought for a moment and gave Han Shuo an explanation. "All right, let me know when you have any news." Han Shuo smiled and asked again, If there's nothing else, I'll be taking my leave. That's all. However, I have some personal questions that I would like to ask you. Is that all right? Baum asked again when he saw that Han Shuo was about to leave. City Lord, you are being too polite. Feel free to ask me any questions you have. As long as I know the answer, I will tell you everything I know. Han Shuo politely sat back down and did not leave immediately. I was fortunate enough to have fought against Mr. Baum, and I was very impressed by your strength. However, after thinking about it, I realized that the energy Mr. Baum used is very peculiar. It is an energy system that I have never seen in my many years on Elysium. I'm very curious about it. Can Mr. Baum explain it to me? Baum was very sincere. He was very curious about the energy Han Shuo used. Naturally, Han Shuo would not tell Baum the truth. However, it would be inappropriate for him to reject Baum outright. Therefore, he made up a series of lies, describing demonic arts as an alternative form of fighting aura. He also mixed in some demonic terms that only Han Shuo knew in order to fool Baum. Baum was completely baffled by Han Shuo's words. As Baum knew nothing about demonic arts, he couldn't tell if Han Shuo was talking nonsense or not. His words were filled with lies and falsehoods. Baum couldn't tell if Han Shuo was talking nonsense or not. After explaining for a while, Han Shuo pretended to be exhausted and said, "I've told you everything I need to know. This kind of energy is rather special, and even I don't know much about it. It's normal that you don't understand it. It's about time I head back." Upon finishing those words, before Baum could urge him to stay, Han Shuo bowed and took his leave. In the middle of the night, the high god who attacked the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy was shuttling back and forth between remote alleys. However, he discovered that he was being followed. He kept dodging and even stopped to wait and patrol the surroundings. However, he could not find any trace of the woman. Even so, the feeling that he was being followed was still present. He was extremely shocked. He had paid a great price to get Han Shuo out of the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy and avenge his brother. However, he did not expect that the woman would possess strength that was not inferior to his own. He thought that he would be able to get what he wanted after someone intervened. Little did he expect that an even more terrifying youngster would appear behind him and ruin all his plans. The way Han Hao effortlessly killed that early-stage high god had left a deep impression on him. He was not confident that he could defeat Han Hao, much less deal with the combined attacks of Han Hao and Rose. Therefore, he had no choice but to retreat. However, the feeling that he was being followed made him afraid of returning home. He was afraid that he would expose his identity and bring even greater trouble to his family clan. He could only wander back and forth in the most remote and desolate areas of Ethereal City, trying his best to shake off his pursuer. After a few tries, he suddenly realized that no matter what methods he used, his pursuer seemed to always be there. With no other choice, he stopped at a desolate stone forest in Ethereal City. He no longer spent any effort in dodging. He surveyed the surroundings and shouted, "I won't run anymore. Come out." A moment later, Han Hao walked out from a stone forest 1,000 meters away from him with an indifferent face. Han Hao was different from the 5 elite zombies. Although he did not obtain the 5 elemental yuan energy and 5 elemental treasures like the 5 elite zombies, he was luckier than the 5 elite zombies because he had obtained a portion of Han Shuo's memories regarding demonic arts. This made him different from the 5 elite zombies. In this universe, other than Han Shuo, Ballins, Sanguiner, and definitely not Dark Dragon Gilbert who could put demonic arts to good use. It was him, Little Skull, Han Hao. Both Ballins and Sanguiner cultivated in demonic arts that were bestowed upon them by Han Shuo. Neither the God-slaying demon path nor the blood god mantra could be considered as the orthodox great path of demonic arts. Other than Han Shuo, only Little Skull, Han Hao, who had obtained Han Shuo's memories, cultivated in orthodox demonic arts. However, as his life force was different from that of Han Shuo, his cultivation seemed to have deviated. Unlike Han Shuo, his cultivation was mixed with the energy of death, making it very difficult to distinguish his realm. However, this deviation did not seem to be harmful to him. On the contrary, it made his strength even more bizarre and unpredictable. When the energy of death and demonic arts blended together, he became more and more powerful. Back when he separated from Han Shuo, his strength was about the same as Han Shuo's. 50 years later, when Han Shuo's strength had advanced by leaps and bounds, he was also making rapid progress. The reason why Han Hao was able to closely follow this fellow who cultivated in the energy of lightning and could not escape from Han Hao no matter what he did was that he, like Han Shuo, had refined demon generals using living souls. Although the demon generals he refined were not as exquisite as Han Shuo's, they similarly possessed the basic ability of stealth and peeping. Therefore, no matter how hard that person tried to evade, he could not escape from Han Hao's pursuit. "It's you." The masked person felt somewhat helpless when he saw the cold-faced youngster walking out from the stone forest. He had fought against Rose before. If the one chasing after him was really Rose, he might not be too worried. However, when it came to Han Hao, he really had no confidence at all. Han Hao did not say a word to him. After walking out from the stone forest, he immediately charged forward with his bone spear in hand. He spread out his domain of divinity, and all the elements of death in the vicinity frantically surged into it. Within the area covered by his domain of divinity, there was also an astonishing evil chi that soared into the sky. The evil chi carried the elements of death with it, and it directly formed a violent airflow that swept towards that person. "Do you really think I'm afraid of you?" After being chased for so long, he was also very sullen. Although he did not want to continue being entangled with Han Hao had already made his move, and he also understood that there was no way for him to escape. From beginning to end, Han Hao did not say a word. He raised his bone spear and flew behind the violent airflow, flying towards that person. The 7 bone spears on his back swayed unsteadily, as though they could fly out at any time to kill. Bolts of lightning formed in the void and spread out horizontally in front of the man. The lightning stopped in the void and stopped moving, using this to stop the violent impact of the airflow. Violent rumbling sounds exploded in this stone forest. Lightning bolts shot out like swimming dragons. The death chi and baleful chi that soared to the sky dissipated, then quickly gathered together again, shattering the stone pillars one by one. The entire area was suddenly filled with flying sand and stones, and the strange light was glaring. The two strange flows of energy tangled with each other, breaking the static electricity barrier. They scattered, gathered, and scattered again. After a while, they gathered again and again, creating the airflow that stormed forward. A 3-meter-long bone spear had pierced through the turbulent airflow, increasing the power and momentum of the airflow. With just one strike, that person knew that Han Hao's power was stronger than his, and his power Upanishad was evil. Seeing the chaotic airflow created by the death chi and murderous aura coming one more time, he felt begrudging. He had to use all of his god power to resist. One of his hands was accumulating electricity, while the other was forming the thunderbolt power. With both of his hands working together, the thunderbolt power and the thunderbolt power appeared. With him as the center, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled like fireworks. Warriors who cultivated the thunderbolt power were the same as those who cultivated the water power. They could use their god power to perform the 2 kinds of attacks. The thunderbolt power in their bodies only needed to be urged with a special power Upanishad to create thunderbolts and lightning attacks. When the thunderbolt and the thunderbolt powers were released together, it was the performance of the god who cultivated the thunderbolt power. Terrifying explosions echoed unceasingly. Lightning bolts flew around him. Gradually, dozens of lightning bolts gathered into one. Eventually, the lightning bolt that had gathered all the electricity in the area was like a 1,000-year-old tree that needed several people to wrap their arms around it. Every time the lightning bolt flew, it was accompanied by thunderous sounds. As soon as he attacked with all of his power, the 7 bone spears on Han Hao's back finally flew out at the same time, falling into the airflow created by the death chi and murderous aura in a mysterious trajectory. As soon as the 7 bone spears entered the airflow seemed to have a life of its own. When it crazily rolled over, it swallowed everything around it. Dozens of 10-meter-tall stone columns were dragged into it. When the airflow finally struck down from the sky, dozens of high-speed rotating stone columns struck first, counteracting half of his thunderbolt attack. Then, a more powerful airflow came. The bone spears in the airflow seized the chance to shoot out. They scattered behind the stone columns and attacked the warrior. He was caught unprepared. He had to divert his energy to deal with the bone spears. He couldn't urge the power of the massive electric column to the extreme. Earth-shattering explosions sounded from the area. The energy waves generated by the tremendous commotion spread far and wide. The warrior who was passively defending himself was drenched in blood. No one knew where the blood came from. Han Hao walked out from the cloud of dust. His eyes were fixed on the warrior. The 7 bone spears were eerily hovering behind his back. A 3-meter-long bone spear was pointed at the warrior. It was at this moment that bizarre space-time ripples suddenly spread across the sky. Han Hao, who was about to continue his attack, bunched his brows and sensed the space-time ripples. Without saying a word, he turned around and flew into the distance. Before the space-time was torn apart, he was already far away. Right after he disappeared, a spatial rift was torn open in the space-time. Baum, the city lord of Ethereal City, had arrived. Baum creased his brows after taking a glance at the bloodied high god. He did not ask the warrior anything but waved his hand impatiently. Then, he immediately flew in the direction that Han Hao disappeared. Chapter 8:24. The reason why Han Hao immediately moved away was because he did not want to meet Baum at this time. Although Baum cultivated in the Edict of Space, it would be very difficult for him to locate Baum if he couldn't pinpoint his target's location. As soon as Han Hao moved away from that area, he shrunk his body into a shadow and concealed the terrifying aura in his body. He chose to travel through densely populated residential areas and mixed his aura with the gods who were cultivating in the gymnasium to confuse Baum's senses, making it impossible for Baum to accurately pinpoint Han Hao's location. Baum carefully sensed his surroundings and teleported within his city using the power of space. But every time he felt that he had pinpointed Han Hao's location, he would discover that he was looking for the wrong person. After doing this a few times, Baum realized that he was getting closer and closer to the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. To avoid being discovered by Han Shuo, Baum did not dare to go any further and promptly retreated. Celestial Pearl Pharmacy ***. When Han Shuo returned to the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy, he discovered that there were a few corpses strewn across the shop. Han Hua and Han Tu were examining the corpses while whispering to each other. Among the corpses, a high god corpse with a little skull pierced through its skull attracted Han Shuo's attention. Han Shuo was startled and immediately landed between Han Tu and Han Hua like a phantom. What happened? Are there more high gods coming tonight? Han Shuo asked in a deep voice as he bent down to examine the corpse. Tonight, 2 high gods came, and 1 fled. That fellow has the power of a mid-stage high god. Even that woman, Rose, couldn't stop him, explained Han Tuesday. Han Shuo's face jolted. He looked at Han Tu and Han Hua in astonishment and asked puzzledly, "Then how did he die? One of you is holding off Rose. The other one isn't someone the 2 of you can handle, right?" No one knew Han Tu and Han Hua's strengths better than Han Shuo. Although they had a deeper understanding of the energy of earth and fire, their realms had limited the concentration of their energy. Logically speaking, they shouldn't be able to defeat a high god. Big Brother killed him. Han Hua said excitedly, "It's been a long time since we last met. Big Brother, you have become more and more powerful." This guy couldn't even fight back against Big Brother. He was killed in an instant. Father, Big Brother went to chase after the other person. I think he will be back soon. What? He actually killed this guy in one move? Han Shuo was stunned and cried out in alarm. In Han Shuo's mind, Little Skull was still that skinny kid. He never thought that Little Skull would grow so quickly in just a few decades. The fact that Little Skull was able to easily kill an early-stage high god proved that his strength was at least 1 realm higher. Back when they parted ways, Little Skull only possessed low god strength. For him to reach his current realm in such a short period of time meant that his progress wasn't much slower than Han Shuo's. All along, Han Shuo believed that the 5 elite zombies would have greater achievements than Little Skull because they were born from the energy of the 5 elements, and they had obtained treasures of the 5 elements from the extreme grounds of 5 elements. Blessed by the heavens, They should be able to cultivate the energy of this universe much faster than Little Skull. But to Han Shua's surprise, not only was Little Skull not weaker than the 5 elite zombies, he had been far ahead of them, and the gap seemed to be growing. Father, those guys have arrived as soon as you left. I think there's something wrong with that guy who invited you to the City Lord's mansion. Han Tu knew that Han Shua must be very surprised when he saw that Han Shua was keeping quiet. But he still raised the question in his mind. Tell me everything in detail. Han Shua took a deep breath. Han Shua took a deep breath and temporarily walked away from the pleasant surprise brought to him by Little Skull. Han Hao. He started to think about more serious matters. After Han Tu and Han Hua narrated the whole story, Han Shua's heart sank. He had indeed grown suspicious of Baum. It was at this moment that the demon general refined from high god souls that had been watching Baum sensed an intense space-time fluctuation from the gymnasium where Baum was cultivating. Han Shua was startled. The demon general rapidly approached the gymnasium and carefully sensed for a moment. Through the demon general, Han Shua discovered that Baum had disappeared from the City Lord's mansion. As the demon general could not tear through the space-time and pursue Baum, Han Shua had no idea where Baum had gone or who he had met. After going through Han Tu and Han Hua's description of the gymnasium in his mind and connecting it to Baum's unusual behavior, Han Shua immediately grew suspicious of Baum. However, as Baum was missing for the time being, Han Shua could not figure out the truth. It was at this moment that Rose walked out from her gymnasium after hearing Han Shua's voice. She walked to Han Shua and added a few words. Then, she said to Han Shua, "That son of yours is very powerful. He has chased after Baum. I think he might be able to find out something. These people are all dead, and they look very unfamiliar. I have never seen them before. I don't know which force they are from." "Thank you." Han Shua was rather touched when he heard from Han Tu and Han Hua that Rose had tried her best to protect them. "You are my master. I have to obey your orders." Rose was secretly delighted to see Han Shua sincerely thanking her. However, she still put on an indifferent face. Not a single emotion could be seen on her face. "Father, this woman is pretty strong. She is much more powerful than your other women. Hee, why don't you?" Han Hua put on a mischievous smile and stole a glance at Rose before whispering to Han Shua. Han Hua wore a sneaky face. Although he had deliberately lowered his voice, Rose was not far away from them. Besides, she was a high god. It was impossible that she did not hear what Han Hua said. Rose's eyes flashed. She must have heard what Han Hua said. However, she pretended to be unconcerned as though she did not hear Han Hua's sneaky words. She clenched her fists tightly. She was obviously nervous. "Don't talk nonsense." Han Shua glared at Han Hua and said in a low voice, "Our relationship isn't what you think it is. She and I are good friends. After 100 years, she will be completely free. By then, she can go wherever she wants. Don't talk nonsense to me." Han Hua was not intimidated by Han Shua's solemn reply. Han Hua let out a low, creepy chuckle. His eyes moved back and forth between Han Shua and Rose. No one knew what he was thinking. Rose had mixed feelings after hearing those words. She was both gratified and disappointed that Han Shua treated her as a friend. She was gratified that Han Shua did not treat her as a slave, but as a friend. She was also disappointed that Han Shua treated her as a friend. This made Rose unsure whether she should be happy or sad. After chatting with Han Tu, Han Hua, and Rose about their encounter tonight, Han Shua's face lit up when dawn broke. He looked at the gloomy street. A young man with an indifferent face appeared silently. When he saw the surprised Han Shua, a rare look of joy appeared on the young man's face. "Father, Little Skull." Han Hao walked over and greeted his father intimately. "Haha, good." Han Shua was very gratified. Little Skull, Han Hao, was the closest to him. Back when Han Shua was still in the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force, Little Skull would always clean up the place for him early in the morning. After so many years, whenever Han Shua thought of Little Skull, he would always recall the scene of him carrying 2 garbage bags and stealthily making his way to the garbage dump in the early morning. This kind of feeling was even greater than Han Shua's love for any woman. To him, that experience was truly unforgettable. After so many years, When Han Shuo discovered that Little Skull had grown into a handsome young man who bore some resemblance to him, the feeling suddenly became even stronger. I didn't manage to kill that guy. Baum, the city lord of Ethereal City, came over. I had no choice but to leave as soon as possible. Otherwise, it will be very troublesome if Baum comes after me. Han Hao looked at Han Shuo and spoke in a very calm and somewhat embarrassed voice, as though he was afraid that Han Shuo would blame him for his incompetence. He would only reveal such an expression when facing Han Shuo. Let's talk inside. Han Shuo nodded smilingly. In a very short period of time, not only did Han Hao's strength increase to high godhood, his subordinates who used to be weaker than him also advanced by leaps and bounds. They became a terrifying God Hunter force in the Death Dominion. Later on, other leaders of the God Hunter Alliance approached him and invited him to join the God Hunter Alliance. In order to better develop his forces, he joined the God Hunter Alliance. Today, he had become a leader of the God Hunter Alliance in the Death Dominion, and his influence was still growing. As one of the leaders of the God Hunter Alliance, Little Skeleton had the right to know some secrets. He had inquired about the cooperation between Baum and the leaders of the God Hunter Alliance before he came to the Space Dominion. However, as he had never had any contact with Baum before, the two had never met. Little Skeleton did not want Baum to know of his existence and identity. Therefore, he immediately avoided Baum. Youngster, I didn't expect you to become a God Hunter. After listening to Little Skull's narration, Han Shuo finally understood why his strength was so much stronger than the 5 elite zombies. Han Shuo himself could be considered as half a God Hunter. In addition to the fact that he was the one who brought Little Skull to this world, Han Shuo would not have any other thoughts about Little Skull becoming a God Hunter. After taking a short pause, Han Shuo asked, "By the way, God Hunters have an uncontrollable desire to devour the energy of others. Can you overcome that desire?" Under Han Shuo's attentive gaze, Little Skull naturally nodded. He wore a puzzled look on his face as he said, "I was just about to ask Father why my subordinates would feel strange every once in a while if they don't devour the energy of others. But I've never experienced such a thing." "You've never experienced such a thing?" Han Shuo was stunned. Even Han Shuo himself had to spend quite some time to overcome that uncontrollable desire after devouring a person. How is that possible? That's right. From the beginning to the end, I've never felt anything different. To me, it's best if I can improve my strength. But whenever I feel that my opponent is too strong and will pose a threat to me, I will immediately retreat. Even if I don't devour another person for several years, I don't feel anything," Han Hao said regretfully. Han Shuo couldn't help but smile bitterly. He sized up the little guy strangely and said, "Perhaps it's because your life force is different from ours. By the way, did you cultivate in demonic arts? I sensed the presence of demon generals in the bone spear on your back. Did you refine them?" "Ever since I obtained the memories of cultivation from Father, I have been cultivating in demonic arts. Other than refining demon generals, I can also refine demonic weapons. Look at this bone spear. Wasn't it refined by me? And my new body, my flesh and blood were also refined." Little Skull nodded and happily bragged to Han Shuo. Han Shuo was stunned. He finally understood why Little Skull was stronger than the 5 elite zombies, Gilbert, Sanguiner, and Ballins. It turns out that I've given him a good start. Chapter 825. In a luxurious manner in the southeast district of Ethereal City. The High God of Lightning, who was riddled with scars, had finally returned to his manor. As soon as he arrived at his manor, he hid in a gymnasium and used the divine essences of lightning to recover his divine body. The battle with Little Skull Han Hao had caused his divine body to suffer severe injuries. He would need some time to fully recover. The divine essences in his palm shone with dazzling radiance. Specks of divine energy from the divine essences of lightning slowly seeped into the damaged parts of his divine body, allowing him to gradually relax. After the battle with Little Skull Han Hao, he had developed a sense of fear. Little Skull had combined the energy of death and demonic arts to form an extremely strange and sinister energy. Although his strength wasn't much inferior to Little Skull's, he was at a complete disadvantage in the battle. In the final attack, those bone spurs that appeared and disappeared mysteriously had inflicted great damage on him. He had no time to evade, and his divine body was pierced through by the bone spurs. That was why he was at a complete disadvantage in the subsequent battle. As he was quietly adjusting his breathing in the secret chamber, he suddenly sensed an unusual space-time fluctuation in the manor. With one thought, he used a large crystal ball in his hand to observe the situation. He discovered that City Lord Baum had quietly landed in a remote corner of the manor. He put away the divine essences in his hand for the time being and instructed through the crystal ball, "Bring his lordship here." Two divine guards immediately walked out from the shadows and respectfully led Baum into the secret chamber. After the two divine guards left, Baum bunched his brows and asked, "Renee, what's going on?" The Celestial Pearl Pharmacy is too terrifying. That woman's strength alone was on par with mine. Then, a youngster suddenly appeared. He chased me all the way from the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy to the Stone Forest and wouldn't let me go. After a battle with him, I discovered that I was no match for him, cried the man named Ryan. He put on a frightened face and said, "That woman and that youngster together could kill me. I finally believe what you told me back then. That Brian's strength should be on par with yours." Ryan had suffered heavy casualties in this trip to the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy, and he himself had suffered a crushing defeat. This was a huge blow to him. He even had thoughts of retreating. It seemed that he wouldn't even care about avenging his younger brother's death. Upon hearing Ryan's words, Baum coldly snorted and said, "Ryan, don't forget how your brother died. Don't you want to avenge your younger brother?" Ryan put on a bitter smile and sighed, "I want to avenge him, but I'm afraid that if I persist, my entire family and I will be buried with him." City Lord, this Celestial Pearl Pharmacy isn't something I can handle. If you don't have absolute confidence, please don't count my family clan in. Don't worry, I know more about the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy than you do. Today, you have found out their true strength. The next time we take action, it won't be like this. Don't worry, I will only come to you when I have the confidence to kill them in one strike. Baum comforted Ryan. After a short pause, he asked, "Tell me about that youngster. His appearance, strength, energy, temperament, and so on. I want to know everything." He seems to be only 15 or 16 years old. He has a rather devilishly handsome face. He cultivates in the energy of death. However, his energy of death is rather peculiar. It doesn't seem to be pure, but its power is extremely terrifying. He is a man of few words and doesn't seem to like talking to others. It seems that he has killed many people. His attacks are ruthless and merciless. Every time he attacks, he would use a killing move. This youngster is too frightening. When Ryan mentioned the little skull, Han Hao, there was obvious fear on his face. The more Baum listened, the more apprehensive he became. As he listened to Ryan's description, he felt that he had heard of this person before. Suddenly, a thought flashed across Baum's mind. His expression changed and he softly cried out, "Could it be him?" "Who?" Ryan stared blankly for a moment. He immediately asked curiously, "City Lord, do you know who he is? What is his background? I have never heard of anyone possessing such terrifying strength at such a young age. I have been on Elysium for so long. Could it be that your lordship knows who he is?" "It's nothing. Just focus on recuperating and don't leave the gymnasium for the time being." I will come to you when I have a perfect plan." Baum did not wait for Rain to ask any more questions. He immediately left the manor and disappeared in the blink of an eye. After the little skull, Han Hao arrived. Han Shuo was very happy. He stayed with Han Hao, Han Tu, and Han Hua for a few days. They talked aimlessly about all sorts of trifling matters. Along the way, Han Shuo shared his understanding of demonic arts with Han Hao and his recent comprehensions with Han Hao. Han Tu and Han Hua were also there. Unfortunately, for some unknown reason, the two did not understand the essence of demonic arts that Han Shuo had taught them at all. Moreover, they did not show any interest in cultivating demonic arts. Han Shuo could not force the two to cultivate demonic arts. Therefore, he placed most of his attention on the little skull, Han Hao. When Han Shuo started to discuss demonic arts with the little skull, Han Hao, he was surprised to discover that the little skull, Han Hao, had unknowingly gained a very deep understanding of demonic arts. The little skull, Han Hao, had mastered the basic methods of refining weapons and demonic generals. Even the methods of arranging demonic formations and controlling demonic weapons with his soul were very effective. Han Shuo gasped in amazement. Han Shuo was very surprised by the dual energies in the little skull's body. He did not expect that the little skull could reach such heights just by relying on the memories in his soul and without anyone's guidance. The birth of the little skull was nothing short of a miracle. When Han Shuo explained more about the essence of demonic arts to the little skull, he discovered that the little skull only needed to ponder for a while to understand even the most complicated application of energy. From the beginning to the end, the little skull did not show the slightest expression of confusion. He was like a sponge absorbing the knowledge of demonic arts from Han Shuo. In the blink of an eye, another half a month had passed. Han Shuo and the little skull, Han Hao, were having a conversation in a secret chamber in the basement of the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. Although the two did not speak passionately and intimately as a father and son should, the two knew that they were the most intimate people in the world. Such feelings did not need any warm words to set them off. No one other than the two of them could understand their feelings. Before Han Mu, Han Shui, and Han Jin arrived at Ethereal City, Han Shuo began to worry. He instructed Rose to inform the divine guards in the nearby Ethereal City to keep an eye out for any newcomers to the city and to bring anyone named Han Mu, Han Shui, or Han Jin to the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy immediately. Father, I can think of a way. Perhaps I can help you get the whereabouts of that divine body from Baum. On this day, Han Shuo and Han Hao were talking about Baum, the city lord of Ethereal City. Little Skull, Han Hao, kept quiet for a moment before he suddenly said to Han Shuo. Han Shuo naturally did not hide McKinley's existence from Han Shuo. He also explained the reason why he would not fall out with Baum for the time being. What do you have in mind? Han Shuo was rather surprised. He said, that high god of lightning who escaped the last time is still alive. Baum might have learned of your identity from that guy. I believe that even if you meet Baum now, he will not trust you wholeheartedly. I can ask other God Hunter leaders. As long as the price is right, I'm sure those God Hunter leaders will be willing to do this for me. Little Skull raised his brows and explained, in the world of God Hunters, there are no friends or emotions. There is only profit. As long as the price is right, they will do anything. Anything. Crystal coins are not a problem. If you really have a way, there's no harm in giving it a try, replied Han Shuo smilingly after thinking for a moment. Then I will be leaving Ethereal City for a while. Father, if there is no need to, we should try not to see each other in front of others. I will come to you alone in the future. My reputation in the other dominions isn't good. If your relationship with me is known by others, it might be detrimental to your Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. Little Skull hesitated for a moment before he said to Han Shuo, let's talk about this later. Be careful. Han Hao's words from Little Skull were exactly what Han Shuo was worried about. According to Han Hao, his God Hunter teams in other dominions were notorious for their misdeeds. Celestial Pearl Pharmacy would be greatly affected if the relationship between Han Hao and Han Shuo were to be made known. However, Han Shuo did not have a good solution for the time being. Father, don't worry. If I want to leave, not many people can stop me. Not even Baum, the city lord of Ethereal City, said Little Skull confidently. As a cultivator of demonic arts, he naturally knew some strange escape arts. Therefore, his words were not exactly arrogant. Han Shuo nodded smilingly. Ever since he learned that Little Skull possessed the strength to injure a mid-stage high god, and that he cultivated in several demonic arts, Han Shuo no longer worried about Little Skull, Han Hao. Although Elysium was vast and experts were as numerous as the clouds in the sky, Han Shuo believed that only a limited number of gods could truly kill Little Skull, Han Hao. Therefore, when Han Shuo heard that Little Skull wanted to leave for a while, he agreed to it without much consideration. 5 days after Little Skull left, Han Shuo, who had been bitterly waiting for news from Han Mu, Han Shui, and Han Jin, finally received a piece of news. The news came from the owner of the Goldstone Trading Company, Miles. When Miles arrived, He wore an ugly face and informed Han Shuo that Han Jin had arrived at the Goldstone Trading Company in Ethereal City. However, Han Jin was severely injured. Han Shuo's face was ice cold. Without saying a word, he left the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy with Miles and arrived at the Goldstone Trading Company. When they arrived at the secret chamber of the Goldstone Trading Company, Han Shuo saw a weak-looking Han Jin. As a cultivator of the metal energy, Han Jin's body was limp. When he saw Han Shuo, he forced an ugly smile and struggled to sit up. Han Shuo hastily took a step forward and supported him. The demonic yuan within his body flowed into his body like a trickle. He said in a low voice, "Don't talk. Your injuries are not light. Stabilize them first." Gingerly, Han Shuo took out a handful of medicinal pellets and stuffed them into Han Jin's mouth. He made Han Jin chew and swallow them. After swallowing the golden bean-like elixir, Han Jin's complexion gradually improved. Chapter 826. Although Han Jin had mastered the Goldstone Pharmacy and was the wealthiest of the 5 elite zombies, his strength was not particularly powerful. As an energy crystal store, Goldstone Pharmacy did not have a particularly powerful military force. Therefore, Han Jin brought a lot of rare ores to Ethereal City from other dominions. When they were passing through the border of the Fringe, for some unknown reason, the news was leaked and they were besieged by a small troop of Fringe dwellers. Not only were all the ores Han Jin and his party robbed, but even the shop assistants were also severely injured or killed. If it wasn't for the fact that there were many mountains and rivers in the vicinity, Han Jin, knowing that he was no match for the enemy after he was severely injured, took the opportunity to sneak into one of the mines under the protection of his shop assistants. He might not have been able to escape the calamity. Han Jin had used his innate divine ability to sneak into the mines and escape all the way back to Ethereal City. However, the rare ores and the shop assistants that he had painstakingly brought over from other dominions had all been robbed. Other than Han Jin, none of the shop assistants had managed to return to Ethereal City alive. After swallowing a handful of medicinal pellets that were as shiny as golden beans, Han Jin's bizarre yuan energy gradually dispersed throughout his body. Strands of yuan energy flowed into his limbs and bones, healing his damaged organs and meridians. Before he came to Ethereal City, Han Shuo had collected all kinds of rare medicinal herbs from the famous mountains and rivers. He had refined some medicinal pellets specifically for the 5 elite zombies that could directly replenish the yuan energy of heaven and earth they had consumed. He did not expect that the pellets would come in handy so soon. The yuan energy in Han Jin's body slowly nourished his body. In addition to Han Shuo's careful nurturing of his body with demonic yuan, Han Jin's pale face regained some color. Half an hour later, Han Jin violently coughed and vomited a few mouthfuls of filthy and smelly blood. He suddenly felt much more relaxed. He forced a smile on his face and said to Han Shuo, who was wearing a worried face, "Don't worry, father. I'm fine now." Han Shuo did not reply but continued to examine Han Jin's body condition with his consciousness. After a long while, Han Shuo heaved a long sigh and said in a slightly tired voice, "Your injuries are not light. Fortunately, I was worried that you would be injured and refined a few cauldrons of medicinal pellets imbued with the 5 ultimates yuan energy. Otherwise, your injuries would have been permanent." "Haha, I knew that father must be in the city. That's why I came to the city at all costs," Han Jin said with a weak smile. He struggled to sit up against the wall and refused Han Shuo's help. "Do you know who it is?" Han Shuo frowned, his eyes cold. "If I ever see them again, I will definitely recognize them. However, I am not familiar with the Fringe and I don't know who they are." Han Jin closed his eyes and thought for a moment before describing those people to Han Shuo. Just like Han Jin, Han Shuo did not know much about the people in the Fringe. After listening to Han Jin's description, Han Shuo was also confused. "Rest well. Here are 100 golden yuan pills. Take 5 every day and don't stop midway. Recover from your injuries first, and then we'll talk about other matters." Han Shuo cautiously took out a large bottle of glittering golden pills and instructed the metal elite zombie. "Thank you, father. I know I will be fine," replied Han Jin smilingly as he kept the bottle of medicinal pellets. Before Han Jin could say anything, Han Shuo waved his hand to stop Han Jin. He walked up to Han Jin and lifted him up. Come, follow me back to the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. It's safer there. You should meet Little Earth and Little Fire. Wait for my instructions, replied Han Jin. Exclaimed Han Jin. Then, he summoned Miles, who was waiting outside the door, and gave him a series of orders. He instructed Miles not to inform the other branches of his injury and to keep an eye on the situation in the fringe. He also instructed Miles to keep an eye on the situation in the fringe. In a remote valley in the northwest of the fringe, a burly man with a rough appearance was pressing a charming woman against a tree trunk. A group of indifferent god hunters around him were either concentrating on cultivating, studying scrolls, or polishing the divine weapons in their hands. After a series of violent thrusts, the burly man let out a long sigh of relief and pushed the dying woman away. He then wrapped a piece of animal skin around his lower body and lay comfortably on a large stone chair at the center of the valley. He lazily looked at the cold moon above his head with his eyes squinted as though he was waiting for something. Half an hour later, a youngster with an indifferent expression appeared soundlessly in the valley. He slowly walked towards the burly man at the center of the valley. As soon as Tanai and the other fierce-looking god hunters sensed that an outsider had come to Tanai, their eyes glowed fiercely and the divine weapons in their hands glowed brightly. It was as though they were ready to tear the intruder into pieces. However, when they realized that the person who came was just a young man with a light purple eye and 7 weird bone spurs on his back, the ferocious expressions on their faces immediately disappeared without a trace. Instead, it was replaced by a rare look of respect. They took the initiative to part, allowing the young man to walk straight in. Hi, my friend. I heard that you have annihilated the entire House of Rio. You have done us god hunters a great favor. What business do you have with me this time? Asked the burly man sitting at the center of the valley. He was comfortably eating fruits as he looked at Han Hao in a friendly manner. Polo, as you know, you have some business dealings with the city lord of Ethereal City. I have come to ask you for a favor, said Han Hao in a cold voice as he took out a big bag of black crystal coins and threw it at Polo's feet. He said, Here are 300,000 black crystal coins. Help me ask Baum about a high god of space called McKinley. If you can get me information about that guy's divine body, I will add another 200,000 black crystal coins. If you can get me that soulless divine body, I will add another 500,000 black crystal coins. Polo, who had been lazily squinting his eyes, suddenly narrowed his eyes when he heard Han Hao's words. He abruptly straightened his back and stared deeply at Han Hao for a while before he asked, Do you know who McKinley is? Do you know about his relationship with Baum? I do. Han Hao nodded. His purple eyes sparkled as he said, I heard that you have been in the Space Dominion for a long time. It must be because of the relationship between Baum and McKinley. You and Baum have always had business dealings. That's why I'm asking you for this favor. You must be looking for McKinley's divine body because you have his divine soul. I don't care how you obtain McKinley's divine soul, but if McKinley gets his divine body, he will definitely bring a lot of trouble to Baum. Baum and I have always had business dealings. It doesn't seem worth it to cause him so much trouble for a mere 1 million black crystal coins. Polo chuckled. He squinted his eyes at Han Hao and said, 2 million black crystal coins? Even if I have to risk offending Baum, I will get you McKinley's divine body. What do you say? Han Hao nodded and replied, All right, I will give you the rest after I get the divine body. No problem. I trust you. Polo laughed heartily and said in an intimate manner, Baum is not a pure god hunter. He is a sanctimonious and hypocritical god hunter. It's only natural that he would not be as close to us as he is to us. Let me know if there's any news. I'm in Ethereal City. Han Hao did not continue the conversation. He turned around and left with a cold and indifferent face. He did not linger in Tanai for too long. After Han Hao left, an early-stage high god creased his brows and approached Polo. He asked puzzledly, Chief, is it worth offending Baum for a mere 2 million black crystal coins? I have heard a little about what happened between McKinley and Baum. Once McKinley's divine soul and divine body fuse, he will not spare Baum. Once Baum is dead, our business dealings with Ethereal City will be cut off. The loss outweighs the gain. Look at how young Han Hao is. It took him only 50 years to become the leader of a faction in the Alliance. Not only that, but he also led a team that annihilated many family clans that hunted down god hunters. Recently, Han Hao has been in the limelight in the Alliance. I believe that this youngster has an immeasurable future ahead of him. For all these years, Han Hao has never failed in anything he tried. Since he wants to deal with Baum, I believe that Baum will not be able to escape. It's more worthwhile to place all our bets on him, said Polo in an unfathomable manner. But can he really defeat Baum? Asked the follower doubtfully. Haha, I have just received news that Baum was nearly defeated by a youngster named Brian. That youngster named Brian has two sons named Han Hua and Han Tuesday. Han Hua, Han Tu, and Han Hao. Why do I feel that there's something fishy about this? Polo straightened his back and put on a grave face. Your lordship, are you saying that Han Hao is related to Brian? I'm not sure, but it's highly possible. If that's the case, I think Baum is going to die this time. Hee, before he dies, I'll do that fella Han Hao a favor and get 2 million black crystal coins for it. I think it's a good deal. Polo laughed heartily and instructed, give the 300,000 black crystal coins to Baum. Tell him that I'm borrowing McKinley's divine body for a few days. Given my relationship with him and the 300,000 black crystal coins, I'm sure Baum will be willing to hand over that useless divine body. McKinley has been missing for too long. Who would have thought that someone else had obtained his divine soul? Yes, your lordship. The follower immediately stood up respectfully. After thinking for a moment, he suddenly asked, Your lordship, Han Hao is an ethereal city. Should I leave a message for him and hand over the divine body to Han Hao? No, Baum has deployed all kinds of energy towers in Ethereal City. He will surely leave a mark on McKinley's divine body. Don't take the risk. Just leave a message for Han Hao in Ethereal City and ask him to come here again. Remember to bring me that divine body. It's worth 2 million black crystal coins. Instructed Polo. Rest assured, your lordship, nothing will go wrong. The follower solemnly vowed. Chapter 8:27. Outside of Ethereal City, in the depths of the mountains and forests, a man and a woman were exercising, panting heavily. Although they tried to suppress the sound of their lovemaking, it could still be heard from afar. 30 meters away from them, a handsome young man of about 16 or 17 years of age was rubbing his hands with water vapor. One after another, bubbles floated out from his palms and slowly rotated in the air like crystal balls. Half an hour later, the sound of panting grew louder and louder. The young man's delicate brows furrowed, and he shook his head helplessly. Another 10 minutes later, the panting stopped. However, the activity in that area was getting louder and louder, as if it had no intention of stopping. Little Moo, are you done? The young man was getting impatient. He raised his voice and said, Father must be getting impatient waiting for you. Can you hurry up and finish it? Right away, right away. The young man who was exercising inside responded with a grin. He sped up his movements and flipped the beauty who was no longer breathing. He pressed her against the tree and continued his conquest from behind. After a while, Han Mu, who was tall and thin, with a handsome face and well-proportioned muscles, slowly walked out of the tree with a satisfied look on his face. He glanced at Han Shui, who was condensing water vapor with his divine energy, and smilingly said, Creating life is the most fun thing in life. Why are you so stubborn and uninterested in such a loving exercise? You have been creating life all along the way. Have you really created life or not? Han Shui rolled his eyes, and the spinning water bubble suddenly flew towards Han Mu. The water bubble transformed into a torrent of water that poured down from above, washing away the lustful smell on Han Mu's body. No, when I get back, I will ask my father why a good boy like me, who is full of vitality, has never created life. Han Mu was a little embarrassed. He chuckled and said, Maybe you can. Why don't you give it a try? That woman is not bad. She has already fallen asleep. You can take advantage of her. Han Shui immediately shook his head and refused. With a disgusted look, he said, Too dirty. Let's go. Let's go to Ethereal City. I haven't seen my father for a long time. I miss them. Hanmu knew that Han Shui was not fond of such things. He grinned and flicked his wet hair, planning to head to Ethereal City. What about that woman? Han Shui frowned. You've done this with 9 women along the way. Every time you knocked them out, you left. Why don't you have any sense of responsibility? Before this, you and I were willing, but after that, we broke up. What responsibility do I have to bear? Hanmu shrugged his shoulders and said, this kind of thing is just for fun. Why would there be so many rules and restrictions? You're too outdated. Let's go. Han Shui was having a headache. He was afraid that the woman would wake up and pester them. He muttered, Xiaomu, don't let me stand guard for you next time. Your voices are terrible. Pedantic. After reprimanding Han Shui, Hanmu said, why didn't you inherit father's great virtue? Look at father, playing wherever he goes. How carefree he is. I learned all this from my father. Why can't you understand? Han Shui bitterly smiled and shook his head. He didn't say anything else. Although Han Mu's words were a bit exaggerated, they were also the truth. Han Shui didn't know how to defend himself. Half a day later, Han Mu and Han Shui walked out of the dense forest and arrived at a small fort outside the Ethereal City. Not long after they arrived at the fort, a young lady standing outside the gymnasium shouted, that damned Han Mu! I've finally found you. Let's see if you still dare to run. Upon hearing those words, 2 young ladies not far from the fort came to their senses. They too glared at Han Mu furiously and shrieked, Han Mu, stop right there. Didn't you say that you would treat me well? You bastard! How dare you leave me while I'm asleep? You didn't even leave a note. The 3 ladies were from 3 different factions. One was a small family clan, one was a merchant, and the last was a divine guard squad from an unknown city. The 3 women exclaimed at the same time. Then, they suddenly realized that Han Mu had been with other women other than themselves. The rage that they had been suppressing suddenly exploded. The 3 young and beautiful ladies charged at Han Mu like tigresses. They were determined to vent their anger on Han Mu. Han Mu lowered his head and put on a bitter smile. He hastily said to Han Shui, who was equally nervous, Little water, let's go. We can't stay here any longer. Upon finishing those words, Han Mu turned tail and ran. He was afraid that the 3 ladies would catch up to him. As he ran, he shouted, Jiao Jiao, Little Me, and Tong, you don't have to be so serious, right? We are just having fun. Don't you think it's rude of you to keep pestering me? Sigh, damn Little Me, just a few days ago you said that I'm the only one you love. Why are you so ruthless? Han Mu, I'm going to kill you. The beautiful lady named Little Me charged at Han Mu with her claws and fangs bared. Rays of light shot out in all directions. Some of the gods who had just entered the fort were hit by her attacks. Little water, run. Don't let them block your way. Han Mu shouted. He hugged his head and ran around in the crowd. He seemed to be very familiar with this place. He weaved his way through the crowd and disappeared without a trace. Han Shui's handsome face was filled with helplessness. He realized that he was still not as fast as Han Mu. After running around aimlessly for a while, he found himself trapped in the middle of the 3 women. Han Shui was furious. He swore to himself that when he saw his father, he would definitely ask his father to discipline Han Mu. He would not be able to hold on for long if this happened every once in a while. Everyone, I have nothing to do with him. Why are you blocking my way? Han Shui smiled bitterly and quickly distanced himself from Han Mu. During this period of time, he had been dragged into this mess and was extremely unlucky. If you have nothing to do with him, why did he ask you to run? If you have nothing to do with him, why are you in such a hurry to run? The beautiful lady named Little Me shouted. If you don't find Han Mu for me, I won't let you off. She was being unreasonable. It has nothing to do with me. Han Shui hurriedly explained. I just met him on the way here. I don't know him at all. Don't take it out on me if you can't find him. I don't care. Han Mu promised to marry me. Find him for me, and I won't make things difficult for you. Or else, don't even think of leaving. The woman named Anton waved her hand and shouted, Surround him. Immediately, The group of divine guards closed in on Han Shui like tigers eyeing their prey and blocked his path. Damned woman, who are you? Why does Han Mu want to marry you? Who do you think you are? He said that I'm the only one he likes. Get lost. Shameless. How dare you steal my man? You're the shameless one. You're the shameless one. He's mine. Before Han Shui could defend himself, the three ladies started cursing at each other in the middle of the street. None of them were willing to back down. It seemed that they would fight each other to the death for Han Mu. Stop quarreling. Listen to me. Han Shui cursed Han Mu in his mind. When the three ladies turned their gazes to him, he put on a stern face and said, "Other than you three, he has said the same thing to many other women. Don't be silly. He won't care about you. Friend, I don't care what relationship you have with him. I'm going to detain you today." A middle-aged man with scars all over his face walked over and stood beside the beautiful lady named Amy. He said, "Since he has offended my daughter, he must take responsibility. I don't care who he is, he must marry my daughter. Otherwise, not only him, even you will suffer misfortune along with him." The middle-aged man with scars all over his face possessed early-stage high god strength. He cultivated in the energy of fire. It seemed that he was trying his best to hold back his anger. It was already a sign of his good temper that he did not immediately kill Han Mu. "Oh, Han Mu, what do you want me to do, you scoundrel?" Han Shui's heart was boiling with rage. However, he was surrounded and the three parties were not weak. For a moment, Han Shui looked gloomy. He racked his brains for a way to escape. Detain him first. Seeing that Han Shui did not speak, the middle-aged man did not speak any nonsense. He waved his hand and ordered his men to capture Han Shui first. "This guy is mine. Don't touch him." The woman called and Tong shouted. Crackle, crackle. All of a sudden, the three forces clashed. For the sake of Han Shui, they started fighting on the streets. The three women cursed each other for being shameless and started fighting each other. The area in front of the fortress was thrown into chaos. The gods nearby were all dumbfounded. Who is that Han Mu? He's too awesome. Three beautiful ladies are fighting over him on the street. God damn it, if I could have such luck with women, I wouldn't mind dying for it. I've heard of him. I think he's from the Life Dominion. It is said that he is a notorious debauchee. God knows how many beautiful ladies have been ruined by him. God damn it, he actually came to Ethereal City. Everyone, look after your women. Don't let that scoundrel seduce them. How did the Life Dominion produce such a scum? This world is really messed up. Why hasn't he been killed by women? That fella's goal is to create life. He preys on all the beautiful ladies. God damn it, some of the bitches are willing to fall for his tricks. How did he do it? Fat pig, who are you calling a bitch? You're the bitch. Little me, who was in the middle of fighting, suddenly rushed forward and shot light waves at the fat man without any mercy. Little water, run. At the most chaotic moment, in the midst of all the chaos, Han Mu sneakily shouted from a corner of the gymnasium. All the trees in the vicinity suddenly came to life and started waving their branches like big brooms among the crowd. With Han Mu stirring things up, the place became even more chaotic. Han Shui immediately reacted. Seeing that no one was paying attention to him, he hastily dived into the crowd and fled under the cover of Han Mu's trees. After reuniting with Han Mu, he didn't dare to stay a second longer in the fort. He hastily left the fort and continued on his way to Ethereal City. Chapter 828. It's all your fault. When will this ever end? Han Shui immediately blamed Han Mu as soon as they escaped from the fortress. If it wasn't for the three women fighting each other, he might have been left behind. Besides, it wasn't the first time he had encountered such a situation. Damn it, those women are so indecisive. They're always dragging their feet and acting all lovey-dovey. It looks like I'll have to find a married woman the next time I find a woman. They're the most straightforward. They'll just go their separate ways after the deed is done. They won't pester me at all. Han Mu, do you think you can get away? A roar sounded from afar. In the blink of an eye, the middle-aged man whose face was covered with knife scars flew towards them. Behind him, A few enraged mid-gods were hot on his trail. It hadn't been easy for them to escape from the fortress, but they had still been caught up to. Han Mu and Han Shui exchanged a helpless glance. The middle-aged man, whose face was covered with knife scars, possessed early-stage high god strength and cultivated in the energy of fire. Even before he arrived, he had already launched an attack. Streams of raging flames surged into the sky and engulfed Han Mu and Han Shui. The speed of the flames was much faster than the middle-aged man's. In an instant, Han Mu and Han Shui's escape route had been blocked. Although Han Mu and Han Shui had a profound understanding of the energy of various elements, there was still a huge gap between their strengths and the middle-aged man's. The two had no choice but to immediately stop and flee. Very soon, they were caught up by their pursuers. Little Water, why don't we work together and clear the fire with a formation? As long as we cross this wilderness and enter the forest ahead, they won't be able to catch us, said Han Mu to Han Shui in a low voice. Given his mastery of the energy of life, no one would be able to catch him once he entered the forest. I don't think there's enough time. Han Shui put on a bitter smile and shook his head. While they were talking, their pursuers had caught up in an instant. It was indeed a little too late to attack now. Damn it, this is so annoying, cursed Han Mu. He looked around and felt regret for the first time. He thought that he shouldn't have dragged Little Water into this mess. Han Mu, surrender now? The middle-aged man approached Han Mu and Han Mu with a furious face. As long as you marry my daughter, I will let bygones be bygones. Otherwise, the two of you won't get out of this alive. I don't have any feelings for your daughter. Why do you have to force me? Replied Han Mu with a bitter face. Capture them first. The middle-aged man knew that Han Mu was an expert in escaping. Seeing that Han Mu wasn't sincere, he waved his hand and gestured for his subordinates to capture them. Those mid-gods had long found Han Mu an eyesore. Without saying a word, they charged at Han Mu while cursing and swearing. It was at this moment that an ear-piercing whistle suddenly sounded in the quiet night sky. A shadow as sharp as a blade pierced right into the middle of those who were preparing to attack. An evil energy exploded in the middle of the battlefield like a thunderclap. Several mid-gods were sent staggering by the energy. None of them could get close to Han Mu and Han Shui. Brother, cried Han Mu and Han Shui simultaneously. Their faces were filled with uncontrollable ecstasy. Little Skull, Han Hao, wore a cold and gloomy face. He took a glance at the mid-gods lying on the ground before turning his gaze to the high god of fire. Little Skull, Han Hao, pointed his 3-meter-long bone spear at the middle-aged man and said expressionlessly, "Take a step forward and die." When the middle-aged man saw that his subordinates were being beaten up by the strange power, he was about to kill them. However, he immediately felt a terrifying and evil power suddenly filling the surroundings. He frowned and carefully sensed it. Suddenly, he turned pale with fright and said, "Who are you? What is your relationship with Han Mu?" Little Skull, Han Hao, did not answer. He looked at the middle-aged man for a moment before he turned to the excited Han Mu and Han Shui and said, "Let's go." Upon finishing those words, Little Skull, without paying any attention to the high god of fire, headed straight for Ethereal City. Han Mu and Han Shui put on a low smile and simultaneously made a disdainful gesture at the high god of fire. Then, without looking at the few people behind them, they followed Little Skeleton towards Ethereal City while talking and laughing. A few mid-gods who had just stood up were infuriated by Han Hao's arrogance. They stood up and cursed loudly. They were about to charge at Han Hao and the others and chop them into pieces. "Stop!" shouted the middle-aged man. When he saw that his subordinates were looking at him in astonishment, he shouted again, "Don't chase after them." "My lord." One of the mid-gods seemed rather wronged. The middle-aged man waved his hand and stopped his subordinates from complaining. He looked at Little Skull, Han Hao, with complicated eyes and said, "Don't say anything. Let's go back." Although the group of mid-gods were full of doubts, they dared not say anything. They hung their heads low and followed after the middle-aged man. "Father, where is he? Have you caught him?" shouted the beautiful woman named Little Me excitedly. "Don't ever mention that Han Mu again," shouted the middle-aged man sternly, This person is not someone we can afford to offend. For the sake of the family, you had better forget about him as soon as possible. Why, father? How could you do this? She had never been reprimanded so harshly. Tears of grievance welled up in her eyes. We cannot let our family suffer a calamity because of you. Little me, remember this. Don't ever look for Hanmu again. Otherwise, I'll lock you up directly. The middle-aged man shouted coldly, showing no mercy at all. My lord, do those two youngsters have that kind of strength? Asked one of the mid-gods in disbelief. Hanmu and Hanshue don't have that kind of strength. But that youngster who appeared later is not someone I can defeat. The middle-aged man glanced at his subordinates and said, that youngster has a strong killing aura. He is definitely not a soft-hearted person. If we had recklessly attacked him, all of us would have died, including me. Upon hearing those words, the mid-gods were aghast. Even little me kept quiet out of fear. She no longer dared to blame her father for his unusual behavior. What happened? Asked Han Hao as soon as they left the area and entered the vast mountain range outside of Ethereal City. Why don't you ask Little Mu? Han Shui glared at Han Mu. Under the gaze of Little Skull and Han Hao, Han Mu felt a little guilty and told Han Mu roughly what happened. Han Hao listened attentively. When Han Mu finished, he furrowed his brows and softly reprimanded, "Be more careful in the future. Focus all your energy on cultivation." Got it, big brother. Han Mu was a little afraid of Han Hao and obediently agreed. He dared not say anything more to Little Skull. It's just the two of you left. Father has been waiting for you in the city. If you didn't come, Father would have gone to look for you. Han Mu and Han Shui were overjoyed to hear Han Shuo mentioned. They asked simultaneously, how is Father? Han Hao thought for a moment and replied, very well. Ethereal City, Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. Baum personally visited the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. After taking a tour around the pharmacy, he followed Han Shuo to the reception hall. He casually asked, I heard that the pharmacy was frequently attacked recently? They are just a bunch of clowns. Don't worry, City Lord. They won't be able to cause any trouble, replied Han Shuo with a faint smile. Han Shuo put on a faint smile and gestured for Rose, Han Hua, and Han Tu to leave. Then, he asked, City Lord, do you have any news? Baum nodded and took out a magical mirror. He hovered it in midair and explained to Han Shuo, that friend of mine is not in Ethereal City. I usually communicate with him through the magical mirror. If you don't mind, why don't we use this method to meet him? Han Shuo bunched his brows and thought for a moment before he replied, Sure. Baum said no more. He sent a stream of divine energy into the magical mirror. The energy crystals inlaid around the mirror all lit up. A blurry figure gradually became clearer. I have long heard of the great name of the master of Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. Haha, it is my honor to do business with you. A rough voice sounded from the mirror. A middle-aged man with messy red hair emerged from the mirror. You are. Han Shuo immediately turned his attention to the man. Han Shuo could not sense the man's aura through the magical mirror and therefore could not estimate his true strength. My name is Lihai. I live in the realm of God of Light. The red-haired middle-aged man briefly introduced himself before he laughed heartily and said, I am very confident in the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. As long as you agree, we can start our business immediately. The first batch of crystal coins will be delivered to you by Baum immediately. Brian, as long as you are willing, I can immediately deliver Lehigh's 500,000 black crystal coins to you. I have a list in my hand. All you need to do is to deliver the medicines to me according to the requirements on it. Baum interrupted. A long list of medicines appeared in his hand. Han Shuo took a glance at the list and could tell that most of the medicines on it were contraband. If Baum, the City Lord of Ethereal City, could take care of this matter, there should not be any problems in Ethereal City. No matter how Han Shuo looked at it, there was no harm in doing so. However, Han Shuo was not in a hurry to agree. He smilingly took the list from Baum's hand and said, I won't accept crystal coins for now. Let me see if those pharmacists can produce the medicines on the list first. If they feel that there are no problems, then we will discuss further. Lehigh was a little surprised. He did not expect that Han Shuo would be so hesitant even when there was such a huge profit to be gained. He looked at Han Shuo with a puzzled expression and said, "Given the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy's capabilities, the medicines on the list will not have any problems. Baum is the city lord of Ethereal City. What are you worried about?" "Not really. It's just that the number of pharmacists under my command is too small. I might not be able to produce medicines worth 500,000 black crystal coins on time. I need to communicate with them first," replied Han Shuo with a very good attitude. His reason was also very reasonable. Li Hai thought for a moment before he nodded and said with a smile, "All right, I like your responsible attitude. I'll be waiting for your good news." Upon finishing those words, Leich took the initiative to cut off the communication. Baum also did not say anything else. After casually chatting with Han Shuo for a while, he bid farewell and left. Chapter 829. Han Shuo finally welcomed Han Mu and Han Shui, whom he had not seen for a long time. When he learned about Han Mu's evil deeds from Han Shui, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Especially when Han Mu claimed that he had inherited his good character, Han Shuo didn't know whether he should scold him or beat him up. Han Shuo thought that he was already very good at the affairs between men and women. But when he heard about Han Mu's performance, he immediately felt ashamed of his inferiority. Han Shuo didn't know whether to rejoice or scold Han Mu for having such a son. In short, restrain yourself in the future. Don't cause so much trouble. Also, don't mess with women that you shouldn't mess with, especially young girls. This kind of girls are always irrational. Han Shuo earnestly lectured Han Mu. Han Mu sat upright and still, with his head lowered as if he knew he was wrong. But in his heart, he was cursing Han Mu. From time to time, he would glance up and down at Rose. "You have brought a beauty with you, but you still want me to restrain myself? That's too much." The corpses of the 5 elemental guardians all contained the life essence of Han Shuo. Each and every one of them was personally refined by him. How could he not know what Han Mu was thinking? Seeing that Han Mu was thinking about him and Rose, and that his thoughts were getting more and more dirty, Han Shuo couldn't help but get angry. He shouted, "You bastard! What are you thinking about? Rose and I are not as dirty as you think." Rose was watching Han Shuo scolding Han Mu. She felt that Han Shuo was very interesting at this moment, but when she was startled by Han Shuo's angry shout, her face immediately darkened. She glared at Han Mu and couldn't sit still anymore. I forgot that my father knows what I'm thinking." Han Mu scratched his head awkwardly and quickly apologized to Rose. I'm sorry. With my father's usual behavior, it's inevitable that I would think the wrong things. Don't be angry. You are the one with dirty thoughts." Rose's hatred grew. "I've been with him for so long, and he has never done anything improper. He is not as bad as you think. How is this possible?" Han Mu made a big fuss out of nothing. He looked at Han Shuo with a wretched expression and mumbled, "Father, is it because you've had too many women that you can't do that?" Scratching his head, Han Mu's face was filled with doubt. He muttered to himself, "That's not possible. Father is so powerful. This doesn't seem right." Rose's face turned red. She cursed in a low voice and walked far away. "Brat, you're getting bolder and bolder." Han Shuo was infuriated by Han Mu's nonsense. He yelled at Han Mu, "From today onwards, you are not allowed to leave the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. Don't. The Celestial Pearl Pharmacy doesn't have any beauties worth looking at. She's the only one who's father's. How can this be?" When Han Mu heard that he was going to be grounded, he immediately begged pitifully. He repeatedly promised that he would be obedient and would not cause any more trouble. "Han Hao, keep an eye on him," Han Shuo instructed Little Skull. He knew that he could not be merciful to this little libertine. Han Hao nodded indifferently. Then, he glanced at Han Mu expressionlessly and said, "You'd better behave." Han Mu knew that Han Shuo was very kind to them, and therefore he was not particularly afraid of Han Shuo. However, Little Skull Han Hao had been teaching them since they were in the Netherworld and had always been very strict with them. Therefore, Han Mu was afraid of Little Skull Han Hao. When he heard Han Hao's words, he immediately shut up. He looked around with a bitter face, hoping that Han Shui, Han Tu, and the others would plead on his behalf. Han Shui, Han Mu, and the others turned a blind eye to Han Mu's behavior. They wore gloating faces. Since Han Shua and Han Hao had said so, they naturally knew what to do. After reprimanding Han Mu, Han Shua's attitude softened and he asked Little Skull Han Hao, "How did it go?" The God Hunter leader in the Fringe, who has a very good relationship with Baum, has promised that he will definitely be able to get McKinley's divine body out of Baum's hands. Don't worry, father. Although that fella is only interested in profit, he does have some tricks up his sleeve. Since he dared to accept my crystal coins, he must have some confidence, replied Han Hao. That's great. As long as Baum manages to get McKinley's divine body out, perhaps the City Lord of Ethereal City will be replaced. Hee, I was planning to go to the Fringe after all of you are here. But let's wait for a while, said Han Shua smilingly. Father, why are you going to the Fringe? Asked Little Skull in astonishment. It was the first time he heard about Han Shua's destination. As there were no outsiders in the room, Han Shua had no scruples. He told them about his plan. He told them that they were being ostracized in the City of Shadows and that they shouldn't stay there for long. After listening to Han Shua, Little Skull kept silent for a moment before he suddenly said, Father, if you prefer to stay in the City of Shadows, we can go back and help you kill people. With Father's strength and our help, it won't be a problem to take down the entire City of Shadows. That's right. Who cares if it's the City of Shadows or Hushvale City? Why should we be afraid of it? Han Hua immediately agreed. He shouted, That old bastard Wallace is courting death. We might as well go back and kill them all. Father will be the City Lord of the City of Shadows. The other little fellas immediately agreed with Han Hao and Han Hua's suggestion. It appeared that after so many years, their instincts to fight and kill had not changed at all. Instead, it had become even stronger. Han Shua forced a smile and shook his head. He explained, That won't work. Although that Wallace is suspicious of me, I'm on good terms with the other members of the House of Saint. I can't just ignore them. Also, Little Water and Little would cultivate in special energy. It will be hard for them to establish themselves in the Darkness Dominion. After taking a short pause, Han Shua put on a faint smile and continued, Most importantly, I feel that the City of Shadows is too small. Our Han family should have more room to grow. Hee, the Fringe is much bigger than the City of Shadows or Ethereal City. There are countless experts there. That is where our Han family should go. Han Hao and the others did not have any particular reaction to the first few reasons. But when Han Shua mentioned that the City of Shadows was too small, other than Han Hao, the 5 elite zombies, who had sparkling eyes, were all smiles. They nodded in agreement with Han Shua's last statement. All right. Han Hao nodded and said no more. All right. It wasn't easy for the 5 of you to gather together. Practice the Penta-Elemental Undead Formation underground. Han Shua instructed the 5 elite zombies. The Penta-Elemental Undead Formation could greatly increase the offensive strength of the 5 elite zombies. As their strength increased, the power of the Penta-Elemental Undead Formation would also increase. After 50 years, the 5 elite zombies would have made tremendous progress in their strengths. Han Shua believed that once the Penta-Elemental Undead Formation was deployed, even a high god who fell into it would have a hard time escaping death. 10 days later, while Han Shua was quietly cultivating, he suddenly discovered through his demon generals that Baum was meeting with a high god. With one thought, Han Shua immediately summoned Little Skull Han Hao, who was watching over the 5 elite zombies in the underground world. When Han Hao arrived at the gymnasium above, Han Shua immediately described the high god's appearance to Han Shua. He is Polo's subordinate. He must be here to discuss with Baum about McKinley's divine body. Little Skull affirmed after hearing Han Shua's description of the high god's appearance. Han Shua's expression jolted. He smilingly said, He's finally here. Han Shua did not waste any more time with Little Skull Han Hao. He focused all his attention and carefully observed the happenings inside the mansion with his demon general. After the high god arrived at the mansion, Baum ordered him to bring him to a secret chamber. The secret chamber in the mansion was surrounded by layers of defensive boundaries. The boundaries formed by the Edict of Space were extremely miraculous. Not even a demon general refined from a high god could sneak into the secret chamber undetected. However, Han Shuo wasn't in a hurry. He knew that the person would definitely bring McKinley's divine body out. As long as McKinley's divine body left the City Lord's mansion, Han Shuo could use his demon generals to keep an eye on him. He wasn't worried that he wouldn't be able to retrieve McKinley's divine body. After observing for a while with his demon general, Han Shuo sensed intense space-time undulations coming from the secret chamber. It was obvious that Baum had torn a space-time rift in the secret chamber and extracted McKinley's divine body from some unknown space-time rift. Han Shuo had used his demon general to roam around the mansion many times, but failed to find any trace of McKinley's divine body. Afterward, Han Shuo pondered for a while and guessed that Baum must have hidden McKinley's divine body in a space-time rift. As a cultivator of the Edict of Space, Baum should be able to do so. This should be the safest way. Han Shuo's conjecture was proven correct. After a while, the spatial ripples in the secret chamber gradually calmed down. About 10 minutes later, that high god of polos left through the back door of the City Lord's mansion, carrying an enormous sack. Baum landed on top of the tallest building in the City Lord's mansion. He stood behind a window and silently watched the man leave. His expression seemed a little worried. He should be leaving the city soon. Baum's energy towers are everywhere in the city. It won't be easy to take him away. Let's leave the city too, said Han Shuo to Little Skull. Father, we can't kill that man because McKinley's divine body is in our hands. If he dies, Polo will know that I was the one who did it. Little Skull looked at Han Shuo and said, God hunters have their own rules. We are going to the fringe in the future. This Polo is still useful to us. Han Shuo was stunned. He chuckled and said, I'll listen to you. It seems that you are the only one among them that can make me feel completely at ease. What Little Skull Han Hao said proved that he wasn't a reckless person. It seemed that it wasn't just luck that allowed him to thrive in the God Hunter world of the Death Dominion. Han Shuo was truly relieved to have a son like this. He started thinking that he would try his best to let Little Skull Han Hao handle everything in the future. Father, don't worry. I will teach them well. Little Skull Han Hao was rather embarrassed to be praised by Han Shuo. He put on a somewhat awkward smile that looked very much like Han Shuo's usual smile. Chapter 830. Outside of Ethereal City, that subordinate of Polo who walked out of Baum City Lord's mansion suddenly felt extremely uneasy. His face darkened, and he suddenly let out a low whistle. Not long after, a dozen or so dark shadows flew out from the depths of the forest and immediately surrounded him. He solemnly handed the big bag in his hand to one of them and said in a deep voice, I don't know why, but I feel that something isn't quite right. Lord Kodiak, you are being too cautious. One of the god hunters flattered. He smilingly asked, should we head back immediately? Kodiak nodded and replied, I have left a message in the city. Han Hao will surely find us when he sees it. Everyone, please be careful. This divine body is worth 2 million black crystal coins. It took me a lot of persuasion to get it from Baum. We must not lose it. I don't think anyone would want to snatch a soulless divine body, right? The god hunter smilingly replied, maybe not. Kodiak bunched his brows and looked behind him. Little Skull Han Hao did not conceal his figure or aura at all. He deliberately let Kodiak sense his presence. He slowly walked out of the forest, threw a big bag of black crystal coins at Kodiak's feet, and said, here are the remaining black crystal coins. Give me the divine body. As soon as Kodiak saw that it was Little Skull Han Hao, he heaved a sigh of relief. He first respectfully saluted Little Skull Han Hao in the manner of a god hunter before he smilingly said, so it's you. Kodiak looked at the big bag of black crystal coins at his feet and said rather awkwardly, the divine body is supposed to be yours. It's just that his lordship told us to bring it back first. Why don't you come with us? Han Hao shook his head and walked straight to the god hunter who was carrying McKinley's divine body. He took the divine body from him and said to Kodiak in an indifferent tone, go back and tell Polo that the body is in my hands. I will give you all the black crystal coins. This deal is over." Upon finishing those words, Little Skull Han How did not even look at them. He grabbed McKinley's divine body and left hastily. That god hunter who was fawning over Kodiak put on a bitter smile and asked, "Will there be any problems? Let's see if we have enough black crystal coins." Kodiak waited for Han How to leave before he immediately opened the bag of black crystal coins at his feet. He lowered his head to check the coins and said with a smile, "Sure enough, this Han How is really straightforward. Let's go back and report to Master Polo. Since we are out of Ethereal City, I don't think Master Polo will blame us." Tanai and Little Skull Han How tossed the big bag to the ground and opened the animal skin wrapping the bag, revealing an ice crystal coffin. Inside the coffin was a well-preserved divine body that had lost its divine soul. The ice crystal coffin can keep McKinley's divine body in an active state. How thoughtful of Baum. Han Shuo smilingly touched the ice crystal coffin and carefully sensed for a moment before he said, "Baum has left his unique imprint on the coffin. Fortunately, we are not in Ethereal City. Otherwise, he would be able to sense it as soon as we touch the coffin." As Han Shuo spoke, a stream of demonic yuan flowed into the ice crystal coffin. It looked like a black thread swimming around McKinley's divine body inside the coffin, slowly melting away the imprint Baum left on McKinley's divine body. After a while, Han Shuo withdrew his hand and took out the holy grail that contained McKinley's divine soul. "I can feel it. I can feel it. It's been 10,000 years. Finally, I can feel it." Before Han Shuo could speak, McKinley's divine soul inside the holy grail emitted a strong fluctuation. McKinley's mind was in a complete mess. The holy grail that contained his divine soul was glistening with divine light. The divine body inside the ice crystal coffin was McKinley's. Naturally, McKinley could sense the existence of his divine body at such a close distance. He was so excited that he became incoherent. His 10,000 years of waiting had finally come to an end. He no longer had to live in the dark holy grail. To McKinley, there was nothing more exciting than the reunion of his divine soul and divine body. The holy grail transmitted a message to McKinley's divine soul. Gradually, a hazy shadow floated out of the holy grail. Han Shuo had removed the energy that imprisoned McKinley in the holy grail. McKinley could now fly out of the holy grail unimpeded. After McKinley's hazy divine soul came out of the holy grail, it carefully moved towards the crystal coffin. Like a drop of water falling into the sea, it smoothly melted into the crystal coffin. Suddenly, a strong spatial fluctuation came from the crystal coffin. With a crack, the crystal coffin was covered in cracks. The pale skin of McKinley's divine body inside the crystal coffin slowly turned rosy. The aura of life finally appeared on his divine body. McKinley in the crystal coffin was an elderly man with sparkling white hair. His white eyebrows were so long that they reached his cheeks. However, his skin wasn't soft at all. Instead, he was as muscular and strong as a young man. When the aura of life emerged in his divine body, he discovered that McKinley's entire body was rapidly transforming. Gradually, his face turned rosy. His muscles became more and more taut. His eyelids twitched and he opened his deep and bright eyes. With a loud bang, the crystal coffin finally broke into pieces. McKinley moved his limbs and shook his head excitedly. He subconsciously shouted, "Haha, Baum, you didn't expect this, did you? I'm back. I'm back. Phil, I'm finally back. Just you wait, just you wait." Han Shuo and Little Skull stood to the side. Their gazes fell on McKinley, watching him shouting and yelling. Both of them knew that McKinley had stayed inside the Holy Grail for God knows how many years. Now that his divine body and divine soul had been reunited, and his strength had been restored, he was no longer a pushover. It was no wonder that he was so excited to see the light of day again after holding it in for so long. After a long while, McKinley finally calmed down. He laughed heartily and hugged Han Shuo. He said, "Thank you, Brian. I really didn't expect that you would help me recover my body. This is unbelievable. I don't even know how to thank you." Han Shuo felt very uncomfortable being hugged so tightly by such an old man. He struggled a little and pushed McKinley away. He smilingly asked, "How do you plan to deal with Baum? If you are willing, I can help you get rid of Baum when we return." The position of City Lord of Ethereal City originally belonged to McKinley. Once Baum was dead, McKinley would very likely become the new City Lord. To Han Shuo, his relationship with McKinley was much closer than his relationship with Baum. Once McKinley became the new City Lord of Ethereal City, it would be much more beneficial to Han Shuo's future development. "I can help you refine many space divine weapons. You know, this is what I'm best at. Interplanar transportation matrices, magical mirrors, whatever you need, I can refine them for you," McKinley promised with a hearty laugh. He knew what Han Shuo needed the most. On Elysium, divine weapons of the space element were extremely rare. They were not something that an average alchemist could forge. Therefore, divine weapons of the space element were very expensive. Sometimes, even if one had enough black crystal coins, one might not be able to find a suitable expert in the Edict of Space to forge a divine weapon for them. McKinley had reached an extremely high realm in the cultivation of the energy of space. If he dared to make such a promise to Han Shuo, he must be really good at it. And this was precisely what Han Shuo lacked the most. Therefore, upon hearing McKinley's promise, Han Shuo was overjoyed. He smilingly said, "That's great, but not for the time being. I need to make a trip to the Temporal Temple and report my experience to the Overgod. As long as the Overgod approves, I can immediately return and deal with Baum. Since Baum is currently the City Lord of Ethereal City, I will have to seek the Overgod's permission before killing him, no matter what he has done," McKinley said to Han Shuo. Han Shuo understood McKinley's concerns. He nodded and said, "No problem. I am currently at the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy in Ethereal City. Come and find me after you have sought the Overgod's permission." The Divine Temple of the Space Overgod must be located in a secluded location in the Space Dominion. McKinley must know the way to the Space Dominion if he could obtain the Mark of the Overgod. "All right, see you later," McKinley said smilingly. The excitement on his face had yet to recede. "Off you go. It's more important to take care of your business first." Han Shuo knew that McKinley couldn't wait to get his revenge and therefore urged him. McKinley thanked Han Shuo profusely and promised that he would find Han Shuo as soon as he was done reporting the matter to the Overgod. He would help him make a few of his most commonly used space divine weapons. He seemed to be very embarrassed. In the end, under Han Shuo's urging, McKinley finally bade farewell to Han Shuo. He prepared himself for a moment before he tore open a space-time rift and disappeared into it. "Father, do you think he will succeed?" Little Skull, Han Hao, seemed a little unsure. He asked, "Baum has been the City Lord of Ethereal City for a long time. He has become even closer to the Overgod. Do you think the Overgod will not believe McKinley's words?" "Who knows? But judging from McKinley's confident look, he seems to have something up his sleeves. Maybe he has some secret trump card." Han Shuo thought for a moment and suddenly felt that what Little Skull, Han Hao, said made sense. 2 days later, Han Shuo, Little Skull, Han Hao, and Han Hao returned to Ethereal City. While Han Hao was inspecting Metal Elite Zombies' injuries, he suddenly sensed that the entire Ethereal City seemed to shake. Han Shuo was startled. The demon general that was observing Baum suddenly saw that the City Lord's mansion was shrouded in a violent space-time fluctuation. The space-time fluctuation carried an unparalleled energy and crushed the entire City Lord's mansion into dust. All the divine guards in the City Lord's mansion were suddenly killed. "No, spare me, Overgod," screamed Baum from the center of the mansion. Hundreds of space blades descended from the void and slashed at Baum's body. Baum did not let out another cry. His entire body was reduced to ashes by the space blades. Nothing was left of him. Han Shuo felt an intense stinging pain in his consciousness. The next moment, Han Shuo discovered that the demon general that was placed in the City Lord's mansion was also affected and exploded. The last image that the demon general transmitted to Han Shuo was the flattened City Lord's mansion. Not a single person was left alive in the enormous mansion. Chapter 831. The upheaval in the City Lord's mansion was very sudden. No one could have imagined that the entire City Lord's mansion would be razed to the ground in an instant. Not only were all the divine guards killed, even City Lord Baum was not spared. He was destroyed along with the City Lord's mansion. Han Shua's demon general, who had been keeping an eye on the City Lord's mansion, was accidentally caught in the shockwave and exploded to death in the violent space-time undulations. If even a demon general in his intangible state could not escape death, there was no doubt that other living beings would not be spared. The upheaval in the City Lord's mansion plunged everyone into panic. When they discovered that the City Lord's mansion was razed to the ground, they did not know if they should continue staying in Ethereal City. Just like Han Shua, members of a few lesser family clans who lived close to the City Lord's mansion had witnessed the destruction of the City Lord's mansion. News of Baum's dying scream quickly spread across the entire Ethereal City. Everyone knew that the destruction of the City Lord's mansion was caused by the Overgod of Space. Every single person in Ethereal City kept quiet out of fear and wondered how Baum had neglected the Overgod of Space. For a time, everyone in Ethereal City felt insecure. Many shops were temporarily closed. Those lesser family clans and those from other divine dominions who had just arrived in Ethereal City did not dare to stay any longer after hearing the news. They made up excuses and left the city. All the gods in Ethereal City were terrified of the Overgod's wrath. It turned out that the few divine guards of Ethereal City were still maintaining order in the city. However, they were all trembling in fear. They did not know if they would suffer the same fate that befell the City Lord's mansion. However, they did not dare to flee. They knew that they could not withstand the might of an Overgod, especially when the attacker was the Overgod of Space. They knew that if the Overgod wanted them dead, they would not be able to survive no matter where they hid. Therefore, it was better for them to stay in Ethereal City and await the Overgod's judgment. No one in the city knew what was going on. Only Han Shua had a vague guess that McKinley must have gone to the shrine to meet the Overgod of Space, which was why the situation was like this. However, Han Shua did not know what McKinley had said to the Overgod of Space. He did not know how McKinley had convinced the Overgod of Space to kill Baum so decisively. Naturally, Han Shua did not leave Ethereal City. On the contrary, the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy was one of the few shops in Ethereal City that were still open for business as though nothing had happened. Han Shua urged his pharmacists to refine some commonly used medicines in order to maintain the supply of medicines that were in short supply. Han Shua believed that McKinley, who had gone to meet the Overgod of Space, would return to Ethereal City soon. As expected, 5 days later, McKinley suddenly entered Ethereal City in a high-profile manner. Many years ago, McKinley was quite famous in Ethereal City. This time, when the people were in a state of panic, McKinley came on behalf of the Overgod with a divine talisman bestowed by the Space Overgod. The talisman could prove that McKinley was the new City Lord of Ethereal City. At this moment, everyone was trembling in fear. They didn't know who the God of Space and Time would vent his anger on next. Although McKinley's arrival surprised many, more people gradually calmed down. The few remaining Divine Guard Corps leaders did not raise any objections after seeing the divine talisman in McKinley's hand. They unanimously acknowledged McKinley's identity. McKinley's arrival was like a dose of tranquilizer injected into the chaotic Ethereal City. When McKinley, representing the Overgod of Space, announced that Baum had colluded with God Hunters and other crimes, and that all the divine guards in the City Lord's mansion had betrayed the integrity of Ethereal City and should be punished accordingly, Baum's death was justified. Soon after, McKinley announced that Ethereal City would remain as it was, and that the Overgod of Space had no intention of interfering with the trifling matters of the city and would not pursue the crimes of others. Without the slightest hindrance, McKinley, who had the Overgod's divine talisman in hand, became the new City Lord of Ethereal City. All the divine guards in Ethereal City immediately pledged their loyalty to him and accused Baum of all the crimes. McKinley had been busy with the affairs of Ethereal City and had not visited Han Shua. It was only after he had gained full control of Ethereal City, designated Baum's private manor as the new City Lord's mansion, met with the patriarchs of all major family clans and merchant associations in the city, and finally returned peace and stability to Ethereal City that he came to Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. Han Shua wasn't quite used to McKinley's arrival. Compared to before, McKinley's realm seemed to have improved yet again. He seemed to have swept away the haze and misfortune of the past. He seemed to be in high spirits and radiating a different kind of vitality. After observing for a moment, Han Shuo discovered that McKinley was even more powerful than Baum. It appeared that McKinley had reaped great benefits in the Temple of Space. He must have received the blessings of the Overgod. Otherwise, there was no way his strength could have improved by so much. McKinley, did you have a fortuitous encounter in the temple? Asked Han Shuo smilingly after sizing him up. McKinley smiled but did not answer. He wore a complacent face as he strolled around the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. After a while, he said, Baum sure is generous with his capital. I was planning to look for a new shop for you, but it seems that I won't be needing it. The one Baum chose for you is already very good. The two chatted and laughed. After they entered the shop, McKinley turned to Han Shuo and said apologetically, It's not convenient for me to talk about the temple. Have you heard about what happened in the City Lord's mansion a few days ago? Recently, everyone in Ethereal City has been talking about the destruction of the City Lord's mansion. Of course I have heard about it. I did not expect you to be so capable. You did not even need to lift a finger to kill Baum, said Han Shuo smilingly. Not only had McKinley regained a new life, he had also become the City Lord of Ethereal City. He appeared to be very happy. He said, That's because Baum deserved to die. Moreover, the position of City Lord should have been mine in the first place. I'm just taking back what belongs to me. Haha, Brian. I promised you that I would help you make a few Space Divine devices. Have you thought about what kind of Space Divine device you need? I don't need offensive ones. I just need something that can allow us to meet from a distance. For example, something like a magical mirror. Also, if possible, help me make an interplanar transportation matrix. I need these things. Han Shuo thought for a moment before he answered. He himself knew how to refine Space Divine devices, and they were all of the offensive kind. He only did not know how to make interplanar transportation devices. Therefore, he needed McKinley's help. Don't worry, no problem at all. McKinley agreed without hesitation. He sincerely urged Han Shuo to stay in Ethereal City, hoping that Han Shuo could continue to live in the city. Having learned his lesson from what happened to Wallace in the City of Shadows, Han Shuo didn't dare to casually agree to Wallace's request. Although he appeared to be on good terms with McKinley and had once saved his life, it was hard to say if McKinley would still treat Han Shuo the way he did in the past if there was a conflict of interest. Most importantly, the Space Dominion, like the Darkness Dominion, was governed by two overgods. Even though McKinley was the City Lord of Ethereal City, he had to obey the Overgod of Space's orders. As Han Shuo did not cultivate in the Edict of Space, there was no way he could become the City Lord of Ethereal City. If the Overgod of Space found him an eyesore, there was nothing Han Shuo could do about it. Ever since Han Shuo witnessed Baum's fate through the demon generals, he had developed a deep fear of the Overgods. He knew that for the time being, he would not be a match for any of the Overgods. Before he gained sufficient strength, it would be best for him not to provoke any of them. You really don't want to stay in Ethereal City? McKinley seemed to be very disappointed. He sighed and said, Ethereal City is in need of manpower. Given your strength, if you stay in Ethereal City, it will become the most powerful city in the Space Dominion. I'm willing to govern Ethereal City with you. Given our friendship, nothing like what happened to you in the City of Shadows will happen again. After all, you are the one who gave me my life. McKinley seemed to be very sincere in his words. It seemed that he was very willing to let Han Shuo stay in Ethereal City. Unfortunately, although he was the City Lord of Ethereal City, the Overgod of Space was the one in charge. Besides, Han Shuo had his own plans. Therefore, he politely declined McKinley's invitation and said, I really don't want to stay in Ethereal City. But don't worry, I will visit you often. Haha, I will be counting on you to take care of the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy in Ethereal City. Don't worry, nothing will happen to the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy in Ethereal City, McKinley guaranteed. What special materials do you need to refine a Space Divine weapon? Tell me and I will gather them for you. With the Goldstone Enterprise, Han Shuo could get his hands on a lot of special materials. Now that McKinley had agreed to refine a divine weapon for him, Han Shuo naturally had to do the same. You don't have to worry about that. As it turns out, I already have my own special material warehouse in Ethereal City. After Baum's death, I discovered that Baum had opened up a small dimension in the sky above the City Lord's mansion. There, you will have no problem gathering materials. Give me a year, and I will make you all kinds of special space divine weapons. McKinley put on a faint smile. He continued, however, I will need you to choose a special area to use the interplanar transportation matrix. I believe you don't have any good locations for now. You can wait. Then I will thank you in advance. I will come to Ethereal City in a year's time, replied Han Shuo. Brian, why are you in such a hurry to leave? Why don't you stay a little longer? McKinley sounded a little sad when he heard from Han Shuo that Han Shuo was about to leave. My son is slightly injured. I need to find someone to settle a debt with. Han Shuo's face turned dark. When he recalled that Metal Elite Zombie was nearly killed by someone, he had the urge to skin that person alive. Now that the 5 elite zombies had arrived and McKinley's matter had been perfectly resolved, Han Shuo had no intention of wasting any more time. He was ready to depart for the fringe. Chapter 832. With the 5 elite zombies gathered in Ethereal City, the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy branch was managed by a trustworthy employee. McKinley, as the new City Lord of Ethereal City, would naturally look after everything in the city for Han Shuo. Even Metal Elite Zombie's Goldstone shop would not run into any trouble. With everything ready, Han Shuo, Little Skull Han Hao, the 5 elite zombies, and Rose departed from Ethereal City and headed for the fringe. Little Skull Han Hao only learned that Metal Elite Zombie was injured later on. He asked Metal Elite Zombie about the assailant, but could not figure out who it was. Han Shuo asked about it, and learned that although Little Skull Han Hao knew a few of the God Hunter leaders in the Fringe, he did not know much about the Fringe. After all, the Fringe was not made up of only God Hunters. It was filled with experts from all over the Fringe. The most vicious and heinous of the 12 dominions were all gathered there, making the Fringe one of the most dangerous places in the world. None of Han Shuo's party were weak in strength. The 5 elite zombies all possessed miraculous energies. The journey was very fast. In just a few days, they had left Ethereal City and arrived in the vast wilderness. On this day, Han Shuo and the 5 elite zombies arrived at the fortress where Han Mu and Han Shui were besieged. As soon as Han Mu appeared, many gods in the fortress cried out in alarm. They looked at Han Mu with gazes filled with fear. It was as though they were afraid that Han Mu would do something that would make them curse him. Damn it. You can't even look after your women. What's the point of looking at me? Han Mu looked around and saw that everyone was nervously guarding against him. He couldn't help but curse in a low voice. Han Shuo couldn't help but laugh. He did not think that Han Mu's deeds would have any impact. But now that he had entered the city, all the gods with wives were so fearful of Han Mu. Han Shuo was greatly surprised. He asked in a low voice, Brat, it seems that you have made a lot of enemies. Hee. It has nothing to do with me. They are the ones who are too nervous. Han Mu forced a smile and said to Han Shui, Little Shui, why are you so careful? With father and big brother around, no one would dare to court death. Those women are all lunatics. If they don't care about their lives and want to settle the score with you, will you kill them as well? Han Shui glared at him and scolded snappily. Upon hearing Han Shuo's words, Han Mu was obviously stunned. After thinking for a moment, he immediately reacted and said to Han Shuo with a bitter smile, Father, let's go. What Little Water said makes sense. If those crazy women really want to take revenge on me at all costs, and I can't kill them myself, it will be really troublesome. Han Shuo was stunned. He thought to himself, this brat is really giving me something to do. Seeing that all the gods in the fortress were looking at them with strange gazes, Han Shuo did not intend to stay any longer. Before Han Mu's crazy women came looking for them, they quickly left the fortress. Not long after Han Mu, Han Shuo, and the others left the fortress, 4 women came looking for them. The 4 women were of different ages, but all of them were extraordinarily beautiful. When they came to the area where Han Mu had just been, they looked around and immediately shouted Han Mu's name. As they shouted, they scolded Han Mu. saying that he was heartless and heartless. It didn't take long for the four women to discover each other's presence. In front of the many gods in the fortress, they started cursing each other. When they heard that Han Shuo had just left the fortress, they immediately stopped cursing each other and chased after Han Mu and Han Mu. "Damn it, you little brat. You really have some tricks up your sleeve." Han Shuo put on a wry smile as he listened to the lovable cries coming from the fort. He instructed, "Let's go. We need to leave this place as soon as possible before those crazy women catch up to us." "Faster, faster," Han Mu urged. He took the lead and flew in the front, fearing that he would be caught. After leaving the fortress, Little Skull, Han Hao, led the way and flew through the forest. After 2 days, he suddenly stopped in front of a huge waterfall. The waterfall flowed straight down, and a cold pond with splashing water could be seen, forming a meandering stream that flowed into the distance. When Han Shui saw the waterfall in front of him, he immediately let out a soft cry and turned into a white shadow that dived into the waterfall like a little fish. As a cultivator of water energy, he would feel uncomfortable if he did not immerse himself in water for a period of time. Now that he had finally come across such a clean and refreshing waterfall, he naturally wanted to enjoy it. Han Tu and Han Hua did not like water very much. They stood on a tree and looked at the waterfall from a distance. Rose, Han Mu, and Han Jin gathered around them. They stood on a smooth stone wall and washed their faces with some cold water. After Little Skull, Han Hao led them to the cave. He said to Han Shuo, "Father, my men are here. I'll go make the necessary arrangements." "All right." Han Shuo nodded and gestured for his son to return as soon as possible. Han Hao's body flickered, passed through the splashing waterfall, and landed in a dark cave behind it. As soon as he entered the cave, a few god hunters who had been eyeing Han Mu, Han Shui, and the others from the dark cave immediately walked out. The leader of the group, a hideous-looking man covered in scars, softly asked, "Is that you, Chief?" Little Skull, Han Hao, did not answer. He released the evil aura from his body to show his identity. As soon as the burly man sensed the evil energy that filled the cave, he immediately bowed and joyfully said, "Chief, is it really you?" As soon as he finished saying those words, a group of sinister-looking god hunters gathered from all the winding caves. "Chief, did you lure those people to the waterfall? Should we get rid of them?" They did not know the relationship between Little Skull, Han Hao, Han Shuo, and the others. Han Hao had never mentioned anything about it. In the past, Little Skull, Han Hao, had lured pursuers or enemies with ulterior motives to the waterfall. These god hunters thought that this time would be the same. Ever since they started following Little Skull, Han Hao, they had never seen him have any friends, nor had they seen him being friendly to anyone. In their imagination, Little Skull, Han Shuo, should be an absolutely cold-blooded, heartless, and ruthless person. It was only natural that he would think that Han Shuo and the others who came with him were nothing but prey. They are not prey, they are friends. To their surprise, Little Skull, Han Hao, replied indifferently. He pointed at Han Shui, Han Mu, and the others who were separated by the waterfall and said, "Remember what they look like. Do not attack them under any circumstances, understand?" These god hunters had never been given such a formal order before. They were all startled and tried to guess the identities of Han Shuo and the others. After a while, they hastily nodded and expressed that they would obey Han Hao's orders. "You are no match for them." Little Skull, Han Hao, coldly groaned and said, "If one day you run into them and they insist on killing you, just tell them that they are my subordinates." After taking a short pause, Han Hao said, "Return to the Death Dominion and bring the others to the Fringe. From now on, we will no longer be operating in the Death Dominion. The Fringe will be our new destination." "That's great, Chief. Haha, the Fringe is our playground. We have long wanted to come to this place. We can roam around openly in the Fringe. No one will do anything to us because we are god hunters. Chief, are we going to stay in the Fringe forever?" The malevolent-looking man was overjoyed to hear Little Skull's words. In the 12 Overgods, god hunters would be ostracized and hunted by all the factions. However, Due to the unique geography of the fringe, it was not under the jurisdiction of any overgod. In addition, the people living in the fringe were all vicious and evil people from all over the dominions. God hunters were nothing in the fringe. As long as they did not offend anyone, no one would care about them. In the fringe, they could even live like normal people and conduct all kinds of business in broad daylight. To the god hunters and other gods who could no longer make a living in the dominions, the fringe was a paradise that could accommodate them. They would not have to worry about being hunted down by the dominions and could live comfortably. Of course, the prerequisite was that they had to survive. Although the people of the fringe were not bound by the 12 overgods, there were just too many vicious people in the fringe. Without sufficient strength, they might be killed the moment they set foot in the fringe. That's right, we will be staying in the fringe from now on. Little Skull, Han Hao, nodded and said, Go then. Do not delay on your way back to the Death Dominion, and bring the rest of the people here. When you arrive at the fringe, just ask Polo for news about me. Yes, Chief. Scarface bowed and nodded. Then, he led the god hunters back into the cave and left through a different direction. Before they left, they took a few deep glances at Han Mu, Han Shuo, and the others, memorizing their appearances so that they would not slip up if they encountered them in the future. After taking care of his subordinates, Little Skull, Han Hao, walked out from the waterfall. When he came to Han Shuo smilingly said, Not bad. Those people look cold and fierce. They even knew how to cooperate when they came out from the cave. It seems that they have been trained quite a bit by that person. Through his demon generals, Han Shuo had clearly seen the conversation between Little Skull and the god hunters. In the memories my father gave me, there are some secret demonic formations that I have used on them. As a result, they are more united than your average god hunters. They know how to win through teamwork, replied Little Skeleton. He didn't try to be modest. Han Shuo nodded smilingly and praised, You have done well. For him to be able to do all that just by relying on demonic arts memories, it seemed that he had truly inherited the mysteries of demonic arts. After taking a short pause, Han Shuo asked, You said that you still have subordinates in the Death Dominion. How many people do you have in total? Han Shuo was very curious about how many god hunters he had recruited over the past 50 years. I have 3 companies with more than 300 people. Every single one of them has been personally trained by me, and they know how to cooperate. They are much stronger than the divine guards of an average city, replied Little Skull, Han Hao, proudly. Han Shuo was overjoyed to hear those words. He did not expect that Little Skull could bring him such a pleasant surprise. Those people possessed extraordinary strength and were callous and bloodthirsty. In addition, they knew how to cooperate in demonic formations. They were perhaps even more powerful than the divine guards Han Shuo had trained in the 8 Desolation and Torment formation, and there were 300 of them. Chapter 833. In the northwest of the fringe, Polo, one of the god hunter leaders, had long received 2 million black crystal coins from Little Skull Han Hao. Polo did not express any particular displeasure about Han Hao receiving McKinley's divine body as soon as he stepped out of the city. After all, he had already received the black crystal coins. One day, while Polo was torturing a beautiful woman in Tanai's prison, he received news from one of his subordinates in Ethereal City. My lord Baum is dead. According to the rumor from Ethereal City, the overgod of space razed the entire city lord's mansion to the ground in a fit of rage. Kodiak, who was responsible for bringing McKinley's divine body out of the city lord's mansion, bowed and reported to Polo. Polo was startled and softly cried out, What? The overgod of space razed Baum and the city lord's mansion to the ground. Kodiak repeated the news. Polo turned pale with fright and said, I had guessed that Baum would die, but I did not expect that the killer would be the overgod of space. This is inconceivable. What's the situation in Ethereal City now? Polo had thought that McKinley would join hands with Little Skull Han Hao to kill Baum. He did not expect that things would turn out this way. McKinley has returned to Ethereal City with the overgod's divine talisman. He has now become the city lord of Ethereal City. My lord, I don't think that McKinley is a person who is willing to do business with us. Him becoming the city lord of Ethereal City doesn't seem to bring us much benefit, said Kodiak with his brows bunched. Polo pushed the beautiful woman away and said in a deep voice, "Don't worry about McKinley. What's more important is Han Hao. Since he saved McKinley and Han Hao is the leader of our Godhunter Alliance, I believe that McKinley won't be so heartless." Do you have any news about Han Hao? I'm more interested in him. Last time, he sent someone to deliver a message asking us to pay attention to the robbery of Goldstone Enterprise. We have asked around but haven't found anything yet, said Kodiak. Do your best to investigate. I think that Han Hao and the owner of the Goldenstone store must have an extraordinary relationship. The Goldenstone shop has branches in every divine realm. It is said that they have ores that other shops can never find. If we can establish a relationship with the Goldenstone shop, it will be greatly beneficial to us in the future. Tell them to keep an eye on this matter and report to me as soon as they have any news. Polo ordered. Yes, my lord. Kodiak bowed and retreated. He immediately left with his godhunters. Half a month later, Han Shuo and his party finally stepped out of the Space Dominion and entered the Fringe. As soon as Han Shuo entered the land of chaos, he discovered that it was a chaotic place. Along the way, he saw corpses drenched in blood everywhere. Fights to the death were common. Some godhunters were devouring cultivators of the same energy as them. There were no rules to speak of, and this was just the outermost region of the Fringe. As Han Shuo and his party approached the Fringe, they saw more and more fights. There was no order in the land of chaos. There were no divine guards to keep an eye on things. Most people would watch and watch with interest. If there was an opportunity, they might even join the fray. Without sufficient strength, one would run into enemies at every step in the land of chaos. If one had a valuable divine weapon, or a beautiful woman by his side, or if one was of the same energy as a god hunter but was weaker than the god hunter, it would become a motive for others to kill one. Along the way, Han Shuo and his party witnessed the true chaos of the land of chaos. They gradually got used to the tragic sight of corpses strewn all over the place. Among Han Shuo and his party, the high god aura emanating from Rose was the most obvious. Little Skull Han Hao wore a cold and indifferent expression. The 5 elite zombies, having roamed the dominions for many years, did not appear to be weaklings that could be easily bullied. No one dared to provoke them. Don't let your guard down. This is just the outermost region of the land of chaos. Rose was somewhat familiar with the land of chaos. She constantly explained, the deeper we go into the Fringe, the stronger the gods we will run into. You have seen for yourself that those fighting in the outermost region are only mid-gods. Even those god-hunters with mid-god strength dare not venture into the deeper regions. Otherwise, they will become the targets of others. Given our strength, I don't think there are many who would dare to provoke us, right? Han Hua was a person who wished to see the world plunged into chaos. Whenever he saw people fighting along the way, he would shout and yell. He wished that he could rush into the fray and kill to his heart's content. Not for the time being, but it will be hard to say once we enter the land of chaos. Rose was not as relaxed as Han Shuo and his party. She seemed to be very apprehensive about the Fringe. 3 days later, Han Shuo and his party entered the land of chaos. It was common to see high gods fighting in the land of chaos. Those high gods wore cold, fierce, and vigilant gazes. It was as though they would immediately attack and kill the intruder the moment they looked at the intruder. Han Jin, were you robbed in this region last time? Han Shuo asked Metal Elite Zombie Han Jin after arriving at a region surrounded by mountains and rivers. When Metal Elite Zombie first came to the land of chaos, he was accompanied by a dozen or so divine guards. Every one of them possessed late-stage mid-god strength. Besides, Metal Elite Zombie had purposely chosen this region with more mountains and rivers because he thought that no powerful experts would come to the land of chaos. Little did he expect that he would still be blocked by a group of strangers. Yes, father. Last time, I was ambushed in the middle of these mountains. If it weren't for the mountains nearby, I'm afraid that I wouldn't have been able to escape. Han Jin seemed to have recalled the tragic deaths of his subordinates. He put on a somewhat sorrowful and indignant expression. He pointed at a few regions and explained to Han Shuo, "Here, there. I saw my subordinates killed with my own eyes. Not a single one of them survived." Han Shuo had seen the land of chaos for a long time. He knew that this was a place where the strong were revered and the weak were slaughtered. Those who had stayed in the land of chaos for a long time were somewhat perverted. Sometimes, they would kill using all sorts of strange and bizarre methods. They would treat killing as an entertainment and torture their victims to the point where they wished they were dead. When Han Shuo recalled that Metal Elite Zombie was nearly killed in a nearby region, he became extremely angry. He released a few demon generals. Han Shuo said, "Let's not rush deeper into the land of chaos. Let's gather some information around here and see if we can get anything out of them." Naturally, Rose and the others did not have any objections. They nodded to indicate that they understood and stayed there for the time being. Han Shuo stood motionlessly on top of a boulder. The demon generals he released transformed into all kinds of lone roamers. Whenever they discovered a group of people in the vicinity, those demon generals would provoke them and lead them towards the region where Han Shuo and the others were. After a while, for the first time, the party of 7 were enraged by the demon generals. They chased after Han Shuo with cold faces. When the demon generals arrived before Han Shuo, they suddenly vanished. Then, Han Shuo put on a faint smile and said, "Gentlemen, I would like to ask you about a few people." "Where is that person?" asked one of the high gods coldly. "Are you with him?" Seeing that Han Shuo and the others didn't seem to be friendly people, the high god hesitated for a moment before he asked, "What? What are you trying to do?" Rose knew the rules of the fringe very well. Without saying a word, she rushed forward and killed the high god's guards. The high god had just entered the mid-stage of the fringe. As soon as he saw Rose's attack, he immediately realized how powerful Rose was. He couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. However, the fringe had no shortage of adventurers. Although the high god was somewhat apprehensive of Rose's strength, he still flew into a rage and shouted, "Woman, you are dead." Whoosh! The bone spear in Little Skull's hand shot out. Terrifying evil energy filled the entire space as it came crashing down like a meteor. The high god was startled and immediately retreated. After steadying himself, his face turned pale with fright. He looked at Rose and Little Skull Han Hao for a moment before he finally calmed down and asked in a low voice, "Who are you looking for?" He was confident that he could deal with Rose alone, but with Little Skull Han Hao in the picture, he knew that if he dared to say another word, only death would await him. Some time ago, a group of people robbed a batch of ores here. Do you know who they are? Han Shuo asked Han Jin to describe the faces of those people. Han Jin stared blankly for a moment. He bunched his brows and thought for a moment before he shook his head and replied, "I don't know. I have not heard anything about them." "Murder," replied Han Shuo with the same smile on his face. Without saying a word, Little Skull Han Hao and Rose started attacking Han Shuo ferociously. The 5 elite zombies did not remain idle either. Although they did not form the penta-elemental undead formation, they also attacked Han Shuo. In Han Shuo's opinion, since Rose had killed his subordinates, it was better to get rid of them as soon as possible in order to avoid leaving any seeds of future trouble. More importantly, there were no rules in the fringe, and one would not have to bear any consequences for killing someone. On top of that, Han Shuo was a high god and his divine soul was what the cauldron of myriad demon needed the most. After roaming around the fringe for a few days, Han Shuo discovered that no one in the fringe was worthy of sympathy. They were all villains from various dominions who had committed innumerable atrocities. Han Shuo would not feel the slightest bit guilty even if he were to kill all of them. Rose alone was more than enough to finish him off. With the addition of Little Skull, Han Hao, and the 5 elite zombies, Han Shuo wouldn't even have a chance to escape. In just a few moments, Han Shuo was nailed to the ground by Little Skull's 7 bone spurs. The cauldron of myriad demon flew out and collected the divine soul of Han Shuo and his subordinates. The divine soul of this person would be enough to make up for the demon general that Han Shuo lost in the battle at the City Lord's mansion in Ethereal City. Han Shuo was in no hurry to leave. He repeated his old trick of sending demon generals to provoke the cauldron of myriad demon. Whenever someone approached him, He would kill them and collect their divine soul into the cauldron of myriad demon. But unfortunately, after asking many people, Han Shuo did not get any information. Just as Han Shuo was about to give up and head deeper into the fringe, Kodiak, one of Polo's subordinates, appeared. They seemed to have heard the shrill screeches of Little Skull's bone spurs and came to Han Shuo. Chapter 834. When Kodiak arrived, he was rather surprised to discover that there were many strangers around Little Skull Han Hao. After carefully observing them, Kodiak discovered that Han Shuo, Rose, the 5 elite zombies, and the others did not look like god hunters. This puzzled Kodiak. He wondered what the relationship between Little Skull Han Hao, Han Shuo, and the others was. Although he was very puzzled, when he saw Little Skull Han Hao, Kodiak respectfully greeted him. Our leader is very concerned about the matter you have entrusted to him. He has dispatched us to search for information in the vicinity. After searching for some time, we have made some headway, Kodiak explained to Han Hao. Upon learning that Kodiak and the others had been searching for information in the vicinity, Little Skull Han Hao immediately asked, "What's the situation?" Kodiak hesitated for a moment and did not immediately answer. Instead, he looked at Han Shuo and the others warily and cautiously asked, "Who are these people?" He didn't know the identities of Han Shuo and the others, and therefore, he didn't dare to speak his mind. Han Hao knew what Kodiak was worried about. He lightly groaned and said, "They are my friends. You don't have to worry too much. Just tell me what you want to know." Kodiak stared blankly for a moment. His eyes were filled with astonishment as he looked at Han Shuo and the others. He couldn't understand how they became Little Skull Han Hao's friends. Kodiak had heard of Little Skull's notorious reputation in the Death Dominion. As an up-and-coming god hunter, Han Hao was a character that the god hunters held in high esteem. Kodiak had never heard that Han Hao had any friends. Therefore, when he heard Han Hao's words, he was astonished. After hesitating for a moment, under the cold gazes of Little Skull Han Hao, Kodiak said in a deep voice, "I led them to a nearby region for some time and finally found out who did it." "Who?" Han Hao asked. "His name is Kage. He cultivates in the energy of darkness and possesses mid-stage high god strength. A few days ago, I heard that he was preparing to sell those ores at a low price." Kodiak didn't dare to hesitate when he saw how anxious Han Hao was. "Where is he?" Han Shuo suddenly interrupted with a faint smile. His eyes were ice cold, and his heart was filled with killing intent. After Kodiak arrived, he focused all of his attention on Rose because he could sense a distinct high god aura from Rose. Moreover, the aura was faintly stronger than his own. This made him very uncomfortable. Therefore, he was very concerned about Rose. As for Han Shuo, Kodiak only took a glance at him and paid him no more attention. Han Shuo's demonic art energy was as calm as still water. Those whose strength had not reached a certain realm would never be able to detect the terror of Han Shuo. Kodiak did not sense any threat from Han Shuo and only treated him as an ordinary mid-god. It was only when Han Shuo interjected that Kodiak was somewhat surprised. He wondered what qualifications a mid-god like Han Shu had to interrupt their conversation. Kodiak looked rather displeased. He did not pay any attention to Han Shuo. He explained to Little Skull Han Hao, Kage, and his subordinates had attacked the merchants of Goldstone shop some time ago. After that incident, Kage did not continue to venture out but stayed in his underground lair. It was only recently that he came out to sell those ores that he plundered. Han Shuo did not mind that Kodiak was not looking at him directly. After all, Kodiak had told Little Skull Han Hao everything that needed to be said. Where is Kage's underground lair? How many people are there? Are they usually there? Han Hao asked with a calm face. Kage's underground lair is located in the Buckthorn Valley in the east. There are about 50 to 60 people there. Other than Kage, there are 3 or 4 high gods with early-stage high god strength. Under normal circumstances, Kage would stay in his underground lair. But recently, it's hard to say. He might have gone to the Omphalos to sell the ores he plundered. Kodiak could not be sure. "What else do you know?" asked Han Hao. Kage is one of Salus' subordinates. He would pay tribute to Salus every once in a while. If you are planning to kill Kage, you had better not let anyone know about it. If someone knows that you killed Kage and Salas hears about it, you will be in big trouble. Kodiak hesitated for a moment before he explained to Little Skull Han how. Salas. Before Little Skull Han how could say anything, Rose cried out in surprise. She explained to Han Shuo in a low voice, I have mentioned Salas to you. He is one of the 5 sovereigns of the Fringe. When I left the Fringe, he already possessed over God's strength. Han Shuo's heart sank. He nodded indifferently to indicate that he understood. The 5 sovereigns of the Fringe were Tyre, Log, Asura, Salas, and Wasis. All 5 of them possessed over God's strength, but none of them possessed the quintessence of an overgod. Even in any of the 12 dominions, these 5 sovereigns could easily rule over the Fringe. Each and every one of them was bloodthirsty and merciless. They represented the chaotic order of the Fringe. In the Fringe, the 5 sovereign subordinates would fight and kill all day long for the sake of profit. The 5 sovereigns were the main reason why the Fringe was so chaotic. The 5 sovereigns were the most terrifying sovereigns in the Fringe. They stayed in the heart of the Fringe. Even a god hunter leader like Polo could only flaunt his might in the outskirts of the Fringe. He paled in comparison to the 5 sovereigns. Most of the gods living in the Fringe would choose to pledge allegiance to one of the 5 sovereigns. If they wished to have a foothold in the Fringe, they would have to offer a lot of resources every year in exchange for the protection of the 5 sovereigns, lest they were killed by the 5 sovereigns. Although Kage was also a high god, his strength was far below that of the 5 sovereigns. Every year, he would have to pay tribute to Salas. Correspondingly, if Kage was killed, Salas would avenge him. But if Kage's killer was a subordinate of another sovereign, a war in the Fringe would be unavoidable. In short, we must be cautious. If we make a move, do not leave any survivors. At the mention of Salas, Kodiak's voice became much softer. He said helplessly, if Kage wasn't related to Salas, our Lord might have already taken him down for you. Unfortunately, he is related to Salas. Our Lord wouldn't dare to offend Salas. My apologies. Han Hao, the little skull, nodded and replied, I understand. Go back and tell Polo that I will remember his help. In that case, I shall not disturb you any further. Kodiak nodded. Before he left, he looked at Han Shuo with rather strange gazes. Rose's attitude towards Han Shuo was very humble and courteous. It was as though a servant was talking to her master. Kodiak started to wonder about Han Shuo's true identity. After Kodiak left, Rose put on a rather grave face and said, Salas is a vengeful person. He has never submitted to anyone in the Fringe. We might not be a match for him. Han Shuo shot a glance at Rose, put on a calm and unruffled face, and smilingly said, Don't worry. Either we don't make a move, or once we do, not a single person from Kage's underground lair will escape. Father, do you think we can win against Salas? Han Hao, the little skull, suddenly looked deeply into Han Shuo's eyes. After hesitating for a moment, he decided to voice his opinion. Han Shuo stared blankly for a moment. He bunched his brows and thought for a moment before he shook his head and said, I'm not sure. I have never tried. Back then, when Han Shuo, Erebus, and the others were pursuing a god hunter leader, that god hunter had over god strength. Even now, Han Shuo could not forget the terrifying aura of that god hunter. Although Han Shuo's strength had improved by leaps and bounds, he had never fought an opponent of that level. He would never know if he could handle it. It's a pity that I have yet to enter Skybreak Realm. Once I break through from Omen to Skybreak Realm, I will have the confidence to win. Han Shuo felt very regretful. As his demonic arts improved, his progress in each realm was getting slower and slower. He had always felt that he was on the verge of a breakthrough, and yet, after so long, he had yet to make any progress. Then we really have to be careful. Hearing that Han Shuo was not confident, Little Skull pondered for a moment and said, Once we attack, we cannot afford to lose anything. Let's go check out the nest over there. Although Han Shuo felt rather helpless, he wasn't particularly worried. Before he came to the Fringe, he had learned from Rose that the Fringe was filled with experts. Therefore, he had been mentally prepared. Han Shuo believed that he could only achieve a breakthrough in demonic arts in the fringe. Every time he made a breakthrough in demonic arts, he had to face tremendous pressure and terrifying enemies. The fringe had experts that could help him achieve a breakthrough. That was why Han Shuo had spared no effort to come to the fringe. With Father around, we won't miss anything, said Han Hua excitedly. He was excited when he heard about killing people and arson. After releasing his demon generals, Han Shuo and his party followed Kodiak's directions to Buckthorn Valley. Along the way, whenever his demon generals encountered gods that they could easily defeat, Han Shuo would kill them without hesitation and absorb their divine souls into the cauldron of myriad demon to enhance the power of the cauldron of myriad demon. The number of experts in the fringe far exceeded any city in the fringe. On the way to Buckthorn Valley, Han Shuo's cauldron of myriad demon had gained 3 high god divine souls and 38 mid-god divine souls. It had only taken Han Shuo half a day. After arriving at Buckthorn Valley, Han Shuo scanned the surroundings with his demon generals. Finding nothing special, he nodded to Han Tu and instructed, "First, open a tunnel deep into the ground." Right away. It was a piece of cake for Han Tuesday. By the time he finished those words, he had already sunk deep into the ground. A tunnel leading to Kage's underground nest was soon formed under the feet of Han Shuo and his party. They didn't need to waste any time to find or destroy the tunnel leading to Kage's underground nest. "Father, come on down," Han Tu said smilingly as he waved at Han Shuo and the others. "Father, come on down." Chapter 835. The dark and gloomy rooms in the underground lair were like little cubicles. Some were used for storage, while others were used for cultivation. Yellowish gems were embedded in the walls, giving the underground lair a dim glow. Although the glow wasn't very bright, it was at least bright enough for people to see. The energy crystals were arranged in special arrays to form all kinds of defensive boundaries. Kage's subordinates mainly survived by looting merchants that passed through the fringe. The looted goods were stored in these warehouses. Until they found a suitable buyer, they would guard these goods in the underground lair. The underground lair had no shortage of experts. 2 high gods were stationed on both sides of the lair, responsible for the defense of the underground lair. As Kage had to pay tribute to Salus every year, most of the fringe's villains would not dare to cause trouble in this area. They might not necessarily be afraid of Kage, but they held Salus in awe and veneration. It was precisely because they had Salus as their backer that Kage and his subordinates were used to being arrogant and domineering. Other than the subordinates of the other sovereigns, they didn't give a damn about the gods of the fringe. With Salus around, no one would dare to provoke them. One demon general after another flew out from Han Shuo. With Han Shuo as the center, a tight net was silently spread across the entire underground lair. Every area and distribution of people in the underground lair was reflected in Han Shuo's mind through the feedback of the demon generals. After a long while, Han Shuo put on a faint smile and instructed Han Tu, "Seal up the tunnels leading to the surface." Han Tu put on a mischievous smile and sank into the ground. After carefully sensing for a moment, Han Shuo instructed Little Skull, Han Hao, and Rose, "Kage shouldn't be in the underground lair. But it doesn't matter. Let's get rid of his subordinates and loot their goods first." Han Shuo glanced at Han Jin and said, "The ores they looted shouldn't be here. Kage might have taken them away. We can only get them if we find him." "There's no rush," Han Jin smiled and said, "Let's settle this first." Han Shuo nodded and calmly instructed, "Let's do it. Don't leave anyone alive." As soon as he finished those words, Little Skull, Han Hao, and Rose dashed out from 2 different paths and started a massacre. Everywhere they went, miserable screams could be heard. Han Jin, Han Mu, Han Shui, and Han Hua happily joined the battle. The 4 of them did not need to join forces. They could instantly kill any mid-god by relying on their miraculous energy and tacit cooperation. Han Shuo stood motionless on the spot. He had materialized the demon generals that were scattered in the underground lair. They turned into dark shadows that wreaked havoc in the underground lair. There were nearly 1,000 demon generals in the cauldron of myriad demon. Among them, There were a few dozen high-grade demon generals refined from high god souls. The horde of demon generals alone was enough to bathe the underground lair in blood. Even if there were twice as many gods in the underground lair, they would not be able to withstand the massacre of Han Shuo and his party, much less Kage and the other experts. Amid miserable screams, one corpse after another fell into a pool of blood. Usually, they were the ones slaughtering the traveling merchants. When they saw that they were easily killed, they were terrified and desperately tried to escape through the tunnels leading to the surface. Unfortunately, Han too had blocked their only way out. When those fleeing for their lives rushed to the entrance, they discovered that what awaited them was the earth collapsing and earth spikes attacking them. Most of them were killed in an instant. Deep underground, Han Tu's strength was several times stronger than usual. Han Tu was now confident that he could kill even a high god using the energy of the earth. As long as he was underground, he could use the omnipresent energy of the earth to attack and defend himself. There was no one better at using the energy of the earth than him. Han Tu excitedly manipulated the energy of the earth. Many of Kage's subordinates were crushed to death before they could even get out of their rooms. The few gods that survived the earth spikes were suddenly blocked by earth walls before they could even get close to Han Tuesday. Before they could break free, an earth dragon drilled out of nowhere and rammed the few mid-gods to death. Han Tu laughed heartily. Under his control, earth dragons wriggled and slithered underground. They mixed with Han Shua's demon generals and hunted down Kage's subordinates who had nowhere else to run. It didn't take long for all 40 to 50 gods in the underground to be killed. Their divine souls were absorbed by the cauldron of myriad demon released by Han Shuo. They turned into lifeless corpses. Who the hell are you? We are Lord Kage's subordinates. Lord Kage is under the protection of Sovereign Salus. You are challenging Lord Salus's authority. You are courting death, shouted a high god of water who possessed high god strength. He put on a brave front while being pointed at by Little Skull Han Hao. Where did Kage go? Han Hao didn't rush to kill him. He calmly looked at the man and asked softly, Who the hell are you? Do we have any grudges against you? Shouted the Little Skull Han Hao's bone spear. Little Skull furrowed his brows and thrust the bone spear forward. It broke through all of his defenses, penetrated his abdomen, and nailed him to the wall. He asked again, Where is Kage? With the bone spear stuck in his abdomen, the evil energy was gnawing at his divine body like hundreds and thousands of ants. He turned pale with fright. When he saw the emotionless eyes of Little Skull, he was terrified. He hastily asked, Will you spare my life if I tell you? The Little Skull did not answer. He gently turned the arm that held the bone spear. The evil energy that was wreaking havoc in his body suddenly surged into his brain. The inhuman pain suddenly flared up. The Little Skull started wailing miserably. He forgot to bargain with Han Hao and cried. He brought a batch of ores to Lord Salus. The bone spear pierced through the Little Skull's abdomen and through his head. Pfff. Blood gushed out. The pitch-black cauldron of myriad demon floated over like a ghost and covered the top of the Little Skull's head, devouring his divine soul that had yet to dissipate. The cauldron of myriad demon continued to float. Whenever someone died, the cauldron of myriad demon would arrive promptly and absorb all of the deceased's divine soul. 10 minutes later, the underground lair was filled with rivers of blood. All of Kage's subordinates had been slaughtered. The demon generals scattered in every corner of the underground lair gradually gathered at the cauldron of myriad demon in the center. Little Skull, Han Hao, Rose, and the 5 elite zombies were gathering resources from the warehouses according to Han Shua's instructions. Kage had hoarded all kinds of resources in the underground lair, including some divine weapons that were not particularly valuable. These things were not particularly useful to Han Shua. He only picked some extremely rare herbs and stones, as well as special leather armor and alien skeletons that could be used to make divine armor. After a while, the group reassembled in front of Han Shua. Everyone had a few more smiles on their faces. Little Skull, Han Hao, the 5 elite zombies, and Rose were on his side. Han Shua would not rob them of the things they needed. Other than those things that were gathered according to Han Shua's instructions, Han Shua did not want any of the resources and materials that they thought would be useful to him. Huh, how did you gather so much? Han Shuo discovered that the 5 elite zombies and Rose had gathered very little. Only Little Skull, Han Hao, had found 2 space rings that Han Shuo thought were of little value. This came as a surprise to Han Shuo. Father, the things that I don't need are useful to my subordinates. Little Skull scratched his head and explained to Han Shuo. Han Shuo stared blankly for a moment. It was only then that he recalled that Little Skull had a group of god hunters under him. It seemed that Little Skull had spared no effort in gathering divine armor and divine weapons for them so that they could grow to their peak strength. It was no wonder that Little Skull would bring so many things with him. I see. Han Shuo nodded. Han Shuo nodded and instructed Han to use the energy of the earth to move the remaining items deeper underground. When we have the time in the future, we can bring them out again. Haha, I'm afraid that you are the only one who can easily bring things out from deep underground. Han Shuo had noticed that Han Tu's strength in the underground base was much stronger than when he was on the surface. Other than Han Shuo, the one who killed the most people in the underground base was neither Little Skull, Han Hao, nor Rose, but Han Tuesday. Han Shuo suddenly realized that the 5 elite zombies were not only useful to him. As they were adept at using the energy of the 5 elements, they could provide much more help to Han Shuo than he had expected. All right, I'll get to it right away, replied Han Tu with a silly smile. Although he didn't do anything special, the underground base was filled with lattice rooms. They gave Han Shuo and the others the illusion that they had sunk to the bottom of the ocean. After a short while, all the rooms that stored the resources had disappeared under the watchful eyes of Han Shuo and the others. Even if Kage comes back, he will have to dig a new tunnel to enter the underground base. When he comes back, he might think that he is in the wrong place, said Han Shui with a mischievous smile. The others thought for a moment and felt that Han Shui's words were very interesting. If Kage returned to Quickthorn Vale and found that he couldn't find a tunnel to enter the underground base, he would be very confused. When he finally dug a tunnel to enter the underground base, he would find that there was nothing there. Everything that he was familiar with would have changed, and he might really think that he was in the wrong place. Come, let's go to the Amphilos to take a look. I don't think anyone knows what happened here, said Han Shuo smilingly. He had Han Tu lead the way, and they left the underground base. Chapter 836. The Fringe was known for its chaos throughout Elysium. However, there was one place that was relatively peaceful, the Amphilos, located at the center of the Fringe. The gods of the Fringe also needed to trade and purchase goods. If every part of the Fringe was unsafe, they wouldn't be able to carry out even the most basic of transactions. That was clearly unacceptable. The Amphilos at the center of the Fringe was a simple town that was jointly managed by the 5 most powerful sovereigns in the Fringe. The gods in the Amphilos were bound by the 5 sovereigns' rules and would not fight or kill each other. However, anyone who wanted to enter the Amphilos would have to pay an exorbitant fee. If the gods who couldn't stay in the 12 dominions had enough black crystal coins, they would be able to break through the encirclement and enter the Amphilos. With the large amount of black crystal coins in hand, they could live a good life in the Amphilos. No matter how chaotic the situation was outside the Amphilos, the 5 sovereigns would not be affected. Battles between the 5 sovereigns would also take place outside the Amphilos. Many plunderers in the Fringe would bring their goods to the Amphilos to trade. Only in the Amphilos would they be able to do so safely. Of course, this was only limited to the Amphilos. Once the traders left the Amphilos, they would have to deal with their own problems. In other words, even if one traded goods in Tanai, they would be hunted down the moment they left the Amphilos. In the Amphilos, both the 5 sovereigns' subordinates and outsiders would not attack because of the presence of the 5 sovereigns. However, outside the Amphilos was still the Fringe. As long as one had enough strength, one could kill anyone who left the Amphilos. This was completely in line with the rules of the Fringe. The Amphilos was a very peculiar place. It was a relatively safe area in the Fringe. However, anyone who wanted to enter the Amphilos would have to pay at least 100 black crystal coins. For every day one stayed in the Amphilos, one would have to pay more black crystal coins. In order to gain temporary safety, one would have to pay a huge amount of black crystal coins. The 5 sovereigns were willing to allow the Omphalos to exist because the Fringe really did need such a place. On the other hand, the Omphalos tax revenue was a windfall for them. They could earn more than 100,000 black crystal coins every day. After traveling in a straight line for 8 days, Han Shua's group finally arrived at the Chaos Valley. During these 8 days, Han Shua had encountered dozens of battles, both big and small. There were small skirmishes of 2s and 3s, but there were also large-scale battles involving hundreds of people. There were also 5 or 6 waves of people who came to attack Han Shua, but they were all killed by Han Hao, Rose, and the others. During these 8 days, Han Shua had a deep understanding of the chaotic Fringe. There was no such thing as morality in the Fringe. This was a special place where the most evil and vicious of the 12 dominions gathered. They believed in the truth that only the strong were respected. The people here were apathetic towards life and would often kill for the slightest disagreement. Many of the villains from the 12 dominions who couldn't survive in their respective dominions would travel thousands of miles to the Fringe. Most of them would be killed by the local tyrants of the Fringe before they could even venture into the depths of the Fringe. Some of the more powerful gods would either join a powerful force after venturing into the depths of the Omphalos, or they would have enough black crystal coins in their hands to ensure their safety in the Omphalos. During this journey, Han Shua was like a fish in water. He would devour anyone he came across. In the span of 8 days, more than 200 gods had perished at the hands of Han Shua's party, including more than 10 high gods. To others, the Fringe might be a nightmare, but to Han Shua, it was a blessed land for him to improve his strength. As the number of demon generals in the cauldron of myriad demon increased, so did Han Shua's strength. Every time Han Shua devoured a high god's divine soul, he could sense the slight changes in the cauldron of myriad demon. When they arrived at the entrance of the Omphalos, Han Shua discovered that the Omphalos was not much smaller than Ethereal City. The Omphalos occupied a vast area and was shrouded in clouds. Buildings were scattered all over the place, and there were quite a number of gods walking in and out of the Omphalos. However, they all had ferocious gazes and were clearly not friendly people. There were 5 checkpoints to enter the Omphalos, each guarded by one of the 5 sovereigns. Han Shua and the others entered through the checkpoint guarded by Wasi's subordinates. The gods guarding the checkpoint had cold and gloomy eyes. They looked at Han Shua and the others with greedy eyes. It seemed as though they wanted to take everything valuable from Han Shua and the others. They did not look at their divine tablets or ask any questions. However, each person who entered the Omphalos had to pay an additional 100 black crystal coins for every day they stayed in the Omphalos. After paying 800 black crystal coins, Han Shua and the others officially entered the Omphalos. In most of the other cities in the 12 dominions, one would only have to pay a few purple crystal coins to enter the Omphalos. But in the Omphalos, one had to pay 100 black crystal coins, which was hundreds or thousands of times more expensive than ordinary cities. Moreover, one had to pay another 100 black crystal coins for every day they stayed in the Omphalos. Even though Tanai only had 5,000 people in the Omphalos, the tax was 500,000 black crystal coins per day. What about a month, a year, or a decade? It was no wonder that the 5 sovereigns would work together to manage the Omphalos. The tax here was simply astronomical, thought Han Shua. Even though he was in charge of the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy, he could not help but shudder at the thought of the amount of black crystal coins the Omphalos produced every year. Due to the constant fighting and killing in every corner of the Fringe, those gods with weak strength but enough black crystal coins would not hesitate to spend their black crystal coins to stay in the Omphalos. They were spending their black crystal coins to save their lives. The Fringe had long ago led to the existence of the Omphalos, making the Omphalos a crazy money-making district on Elysium. Father, if we take control of the Omphalos, we will never have to worry about black crystal coins again. Little Skull Han Hao whispered to Han Shua as soon as they entered the Omphalos. In truth, the Omphalos did not have a particularly strong defense. It was only guarded by squads of guards from the 5 sovereigns. These guards were responsible for maintaining order in the Omphalos and collecting taxes. After paying the taxes, a small badge would always shine on the chest of a god. After one day, the badge would stop shining. At that time, the badge would have to be refilled with that special energy and pay black crystal coins again. When the guards of the 5 sovereigns noticed that the badge on the chest of a god had stopped shining, they would immediately demand that the god pay black crystal coins to refill the badge. If the god did not pay enough black crystal coins, the god would be mercilessly banished from the Amphilas. Only by paying the required amount of black crystal coins would the god be allowed to stay in the Amphilas. Han Shuo stroked the badge on his chest and released a strand of his consciousness to secretly probe the energy within it. The strand of bizarre energy seemed to have its own consciousness. Before Han Shuo's consciousness came into contact with the badge, he immediately sensed the vigilance of the energy. Han Shuo was shocked. He was certain that the badge contained a strand of the Overgod's consciousness. Just like the strange energy in Ebony's body, it had its own consciousness. Of course, Han Shuo could easily obliterate that strand of consciousness. However, doing so would definitely alarm the person who released it. In that case, Han Shuo and the others might immediately face the interrogation of a monarch. Perhaps a great battle would be unavoidable. Han Shuo had no intention of starting a war with any of the 5 sovereigns for the time being. After withdrawing the strand of consciousness, Han Shuo nodded at Little Skull, Han Hao, and the others and said softly, "Don't touch the energy in the badge." Chapter 837. She was skinny and didn't have much meat on her body. Her skin was greenish-brown, her eyebrows were sparse, and the wrinkles on her face were like deep ravines. When she grinned crazily, the wrinkles squeezed together, giving a strong visual impact. So ugly. Perhaps everyone who saw her appearance would involuntarily give birth to such a sigh. She floated towards Han Shuo and Han Shuo. There was an obvious aura of death on her body. She was a mid-stage high god. Even in Tanai, such strength was rare. Behind her were 7 guards. 3 of them possessed early-stage high god strength. Every one of them was hideous and had cold, gloomy faces. Normally, when faced with her valiant strength, people would never speak the truth about their feelings and their hearts. No one would point out the flaws in her appearance to avoid angering her and causing trouble for themselves. However, on Han Shuo's side were people like Han Hua and Han Mu who had no scruples. Before she could reach Rose, Han Hua suddenly shrieked, "Wow, what a monster! So ugly. I have never seen a woman uglier than her. Damn it, how unlucky." Han Mu also cried out loudly. His face was filled with fright as he retreated to avoid the attack. The reason the two had ridiculed Han Shuo was because they had sensed the woman's hostility towards them. "Bertha, it's you." Rose's face jolted. Her beautiful eyes were brimming with murderous intent. The hideous old woman let out a sinister laugh. She greeted Rose with a sinister smile. Then, she turned to Han Hua and Han Mu and said, "You 2 reckless brats, I won't argue with you here. But you better not leave the Amphilas, or you will die." "Ugly woman, are you afraid of being criticized for your ugliness?" When Han Hua heard Bertha's threat, he immediately said in a sarcastic tone, "Your face looks like it's rotten. Even I can smell a nauseating stench coming from it. You still dare to show yourself in such a state? I must say, I admire your courage." Han Mu did not waste any more words. He kept as far away as possible from Han Hua. The disgust on his face was very obvious. Bertha knew that her appearance was unbearable to look at, but this was the first time anyone had ever ridiculed her with such vicious words. She suddenly glared at Han Hua like a viper, ready to kill. "Bertha, don't cause trouble here." Suddenly, a warning came from afar. A group of Amphilas guards looked at them coldly. Suppressing the rage in her heart, Bertha stared coldly at Rose and said in a low voice, "I've been looking for you for a long time. I thought you would be hiding. Hee, I didn't expect you to show up in the fringe. Good, very good. The moment you leave the Amphilas will be the moment of your death." After that, Bertha nodded at Han Hua and Han Mu and said with a hideous smile, "You 2 brats, when the time comes, You will know the consequences of trying to please yourself." She then waved her hand and said, "Let's go." The guards who had followed them all looked deeply in their direction, memorizing the faces of Han Shua's party in their hearts before they left apathetically. "Who is she? What grudge do you have against her?" asked Han Shua in a soft voice after Bertha left. Rose had been staring at Bertha until she disappeared from view. She then explained to Han Shua, "Bertha and I used to be friends in the fringe, but when her son tried to harm me with a potion, I killed him. After that incident, Bertha went on a killing spree. She never stopped looking for trouble until I left the fringe." "Any man would want someone like her?" asked Han Mu as though he was making a fuss about nothing. "Her current appearance was caused by a serious injury. Before she was disfigured, Bertha was quite pretty," explained Rose indifferently after shooting a glance at Han Mu. "Don't worry about her. If we run into her when we leave the city, she will be courting death." Han Shua did not take Bertha seriously at all. To him, a mid-stage high god was far from being a threat to them. Bertha might be easy to deal with, but her husband, Buzz, is a different story. Rose let out a soft sigh and explained, "Buzz possesses late-stage high god strength and cultivates in the Edict of Destruction. Back in the fringe, he was known for his ruthlessness and ruthlessness. He had a large group of criminals under his control. When Bertha saw that we possess extraordinary strength, she will definitely send a message to Buzz. I believe that it won't be long before Buzz arrives at the Omphalos. Buzz is quite famous in the fringe, and many people have to give him face. By that time, once we leave the Omphalos, we won't be able to escape from Buzz and Bertha's pursuit." Rose's face turned gloomy. She looked at Han Shua and sighed. "I'm sorry, I didn't want to cause you so much trouble." Han Shua shook his head smilingly and said, "Although there are countless ferocious and ruthless people in the fringe, the 5 sovereigns are the only ones I care about. No matter how powerful Buzz is, he's just a high god. Don't worry, if he dares to show up, I won't mind giving him a taste of what it's like to offend us." "That's right. She's just a whore who spoils her son. Why would we be afraid of her?" Han Hua comforted Rose. Han Shua's impression of Rose had changed ever since the incident at the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy in Ethereal City, where Rose was attacked by a large group of assailants and asked Han Tu and himself to leave first. In Han Shua's mind, Han Shua was the most powerful person in the world. He had a blind trust in Han Shua and did not believe that anyone could defeat Han Shua. This blind trust came from their past experiences. They had been serving Han Shua for many years and had never seen Han Shua suffer a loss. As time went by, their trust in Han Shua grew more and more blind. "Father, as long as you can deal with Buzz, we won't lose." Han Hao, the little skull, was not as blind as Han Hua. As his strength rapidly increased, he was able to see things more intuitively. "Don't worry, it'll be fine." Han Shua put on a confident smile and continued, "Come, let's continue our stroll. Let's see if we can get any information about Kage." As long as one had enough black crystal coins, one would be able to obtain the information one wanted in the Omphalos. There were people in the Omphalos who specialized in selling information. There were many caravans passing through the land of chaos. If the fringe dwellers wanted to plunder, they could get the most detailed information from Wind Spirit in the Omphalos. In the beginning, Wind Spirits only sold such information. But gradually, Wind Spirits sold all kinds of information. As long as one was willing to spend black crystal coins, Wind Spirits would be able to get all kinds of information. Han Shua threw out 1,000 black crystal coins and learned about Kage from Wind Spirits. He learned that Kage visited the Omphalos 5 days ago and went to pay tribute to Salus. Kage should be on the Empyrean Peak of Salus. Although Tyre, Log, Asura, Salus, and Wasis were in charge of the management of the Omphalos, they usually did not come to the Omphalos. There were countless famous mountains, rivers, lakes, and abysses in the vast fringe. Tyre, Log, Asura, Salus, and Wasis lived in the most dangerous and mysterious regions. Salus lived on the Empyrean Peak. The Empyrean Peak was 100,000 meters tall and looked like a gigantic sword piercing through the clouds. The Empyrean Peak represented Salus' authority. His subordinates would come to the Empyrean Peak every year to pay tribute to him. Under normal circumstances, Salus would not leave the Empyrean Peak. He would only show himself when his subordinates couldn't solve a problem. As soon as Han Shuo heard that Kage was currently residing on Salus Empyrean Peak, he knew that it would be impossible for him to capture Kage for the time being. Not only was Salus in the Empyrean Peak, but his most powerful subordinates were also stationed there all year round. The Empyrean Peak was densely covered with boundaries. Han Shuo knew that with just Han Hao, Rose, and the others, he would be in big trouble if he tried to force his way into the Empyrean Peak. Han Shuo did not intend to go to the Empyrean Peak and challenge Salus immediately. He would have to wait until Kage left the Empyrean Peak. Not long after Kage, Han Hao, and Rose wandered around Tanai, a group of guards approached them. They were led by a cold-faced, arrogant, late-stage high god of darkness. "My friends, I heard that you have offended Bertha and Buzz?" the leader of the group asked as he raised his head. "What does it have to do with you?" replied Han Hua impatiently. He was annoyed to see Duan Ling Tian acting all high and mighty. "You still don't know when you're about to die," shouted the guard coldly. He looked at Han Shuo and his party. Perhaps he felt that Rose was the strongest among them. He turned to Rose and said, "There are not many people in the Fringe who dare to disrespect Buzz and Bertha. They are waiting for you outside the Omphalos. Once you leave the Omphalos, you will be hunted down by Buzz and Bertha. If you want to live, hand over 1,000,000 black crystal coins, and I will escort you out of the Omphalos. What do you say?" Rose did not reply, but turned her gaze to Han Shuo. The guard was stunned for a moment. He immediately realized that he had targeted the wrong person. It turned out that Han Shuo was their leader. He was very flabbergasted. After carefully observing Han Shuo for a moment, he discovered that Han Shuo's body did not give off any particularly intense energy fluctuations. This baffled him. "No need." Han Shuo shook his head and refused. The guard did not continue to pester Han Shuo. He sneered and nodded. He waved his hand and was about to leave with his party. It seemed that he was certain that Han Shuo and his party would die. "Wait," said Han Shuo again. When the guard turned around, Han Shuo smilingly asked, "May I know your name?" "Haralai. Have you changed your mind?" said the guard arrogantly. "I want 1.5 million black crystal coins. Otherwise, there's nothing to talk about." Han Shuo shook his head smilingly and said, "No, I don't think so. You don't seem to belong to the 5 sovereigns. Your subordinates are quite strong. Are you interested in following me?" Haralai was stunned. He looked at Han Shuo as though he was looking at a fool and said in a mocking tone, "Ask around in the Fringe who I am. Even the 5 sovereigns tried to recruit me, but I refused. Who do you think you are?" Haralai waved his hand and said, "Let's go. This man must be crazy." Chapter 838. "My lord, is that guy out of his mind? What a joke. He's just a lowly mid-god, and he wants my lord to submit to him. My lord, we should get rid of him," shouted one of Haralai's subordinates as soon as he left. From his point of view, Han Shuo's actions were enough to get him killed hundreds of times over. What a lunatic. No wonder Buzz wants to kill them. They are courting death, said another of Haralai's subordinates disdainfully. "We don't even need to do anything. As soon as they leave the Omphalos, death will be waiting for them." Haralai's face turned gloomy. He did not expect that Han Shuo would dare to utter such arrogant words. It was a great humiliation to him. Haralai was one of the top characters in the Fringe. Sometimes, he wouldn't even listen to the 5 sovereigns. He had lived in the Fringe for many years and had never suffered any losses. His reputation was even greater than Buzz's. That was why he dared to take on the job. He thought that under such circumstances, Han Shuo and his party would be more than happy to spend 1,000,000 black crystal coins to seek his protection. After all, although crystal coins were precious, they were far less valuable than the lives of 8 people. Haralai did not expect that not only did Han Shuo not have the slightest intention of seeking protection, but he even dared to utter such arrogant words. That was not the way a normal person should think. "Lasha, stay here and keep an eye on them. See when they will leave the Omphalos. Once they leave, send me a message. I want to see how they will die." Haralai coldly groaned and instructed one of his subordinates. A high god of earth nodded, turned around, and went into a complicated street. He hid in a dark corner and watched Han Shuo and his party from afar. I have never heard of Haralai before, but for him to dare to go against Buzz, he must possess extraordinary strength. "My lord, you are being a little too rude." Rose didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She couldn't understand why Han Shuo would make such a bold claim. No matter what, Haralai was one of the most powerful people in the Fringe. Before Han Shuo could prove his terrifying strength, he would only look like a joke in the eyes of others. Han Shuo had his own plans. He turned to Rose smilingly and said, "To deal with a proud and arrogant person like Haralai, we need to use some special means. Just wait and see. He will definitely feel indignant and secretly observe our every move. Hee, as long as there's curiosity in my heart, I'll drag him onto my pirate ship bit by bit." We're not familiar with the Fringe at all. If we can subdue Haralai, the local tyrant, it will be very convenient for us in the future. Father, Haralai will definitely keep an eye on us. As long as we can prove that we possess strength that far surpasses the average Fringe, and Father sincerely invites us to join him, we might really succeed. Han Hao, the little skull, expressed his opinion after thinking for a moment. To deal with someone as arrogant as Haralai, one must first overwhelm him in terms of demeanor and make him admit that he is far inferior to one in all aspects. Then, one must suddenly change his attitude and invite him sincerely. That way, the chances of success would be very high. Han Shuo looked at Little Skull and thought to himself, "It seems that Little Skull understands me the best. Rose doesn't have any experience in dealing with humans. She clearly isn't an expert in this aspect." "Rose, you mentioned that you have some friends in the Fringe. Do you think any of them can join us?" Han Shuo bunched his brows and pondered for a moment before he suddenly asked. Rose stared blankly for a moment before she nodded and replied, "I do have some friends, but I don't think they will be staying in the Omphalos. They don't have that many black crystal coins to spend. If we want to find them, we must leave the Omphalos. But with Buzz blocking our way outside the Omphalos, it's going to be a little difficult." "Then let's leave the Omphalos first. The battles outside the Omphalos are more suitable for us." Han Shuo rolled his eyes and said, "There are some people who are paying close attention to our every move. Hee, it seems like we're quite popular in the Fringe. Are we really leaving the Omphalos?" Perhaps it was because Buzz and Bertha had left too deep of an impression on her that Rose wasn't as straightforward as usual. "Let's leave the Omphalos," Han Shuo affirmed before he leisurely made his way to the checkpoint of the Omphalos. He could sense that there were several people watching them from the shadows. Those people were probably Buzz and Haralai's subordinates. The streets of the Omphalos were lined with stalls selling various kinds of goods. Along the way, Han Shuo even had the mood to squat down and observe the goods. He would buy whatever he liked without hesitation. The origins of the goods in the Fringe were usually unusual. The sellers were usually the representatives of various factions. Many of these people were also engaged in special trades. They would first sell the goods to the buyer to see if the buyer had enough black crystal coins. Then, as soon as the buyer left the Omphalos, they would immediately rob the buyer of the goods. Not only would they rob the buyer of the goods, but they would also rob the buyer of the black crystal coins and the buyer's life. There was a strange phenomenon that often occurred in the Fringe. Someone would sell an expensive product at a very low price. Then, a day or two later, that person would reappear and sell the same product. Then, a few days later, they would reappear at the same location with the same product. That was what they were doing. Rose was very familiar with this trade. When Han Shuo bought a few high-grade chalcedony crystals and bones of ice at a very low price, Rose would remind Han Shuo what kind of trade those people were doing. Not only was Han Shuo not worried at all, he even excitedly asked Rose, "Keep an eye out and see who else is doing this trade. Hee, it would be a waste not to take advantage of this opportunity. But once we leave the Omphalos, they will definitely surround us like flies. We already have Buzz and Bertha outside the Omphalos, and that Haralai will not let us off easily. If there are other factions here, won't we be surrounded by powerful enemies? Rose was used to being a lone wolf. She had always kept to herself when she was in the fringe and did not provoke powerful enemies. So, she did not understand why Han Shuo would do this. That's exactly what I want. Han Shuo chuckled and urged Rose, don't worry about it. Just point me to the people who are doing this trade. Since we are going to make a scene, we need to make it big. Otherwise, how are we going to make a name for ourselves in the fringe so quickly? Rose could not help but smile bitterly in her heart. She wondered if it was the right decision to bring Han Shuo to the fringe. If Han Shuo were to do this, he would offend all the factions in the fringe. If hundreds or thousands of experts from the fringe were to gang up on them, Rose did not know if she would be able to leave the fringe alive. Han Shuo took a glance at Rose and guessed what she was thinking from her expression. He couldn't help but laugh and said, "You have been with me for so long. When have you ever seen me fight a battle I'm not confident of winning? With these little fellas around, even if the 5 sovereigns come, we will be able to leave the fringe with ease. Don't you worry too much." Although the 5 elite zombies themselves weren't necessarily very powerful, their innate abilities were incomparably miraculous. Just the Earth elite zombies' ability to burrow through the ground allowed them to shake off layers upon layers of pursuers. In addition to the metal elite zombies' unimpeded movement between mountains and rivers, and the wood elite zombies' ability to conceal himself in the forest, who could catch them? All right then, I'll point them out to you. Rose took the lead and walked in front. She secretly pointed out some special products to Han Shuo, hinting to him that those people were special people who specialized in this trade. After paying close attention, Han Shuo discovered that those people had very strange gazes. They would pay close attention to everything around them. They would secretly observe the person's strength, the clothes they were wearing, the capacity of their space ring, and the expression on their faces when they took out their black crystal coins to purchase their products. Through such detailed observation, they could determine the general strength and wealth of a person. They would then use their own channels to contact their buddies outside of the fringe and assemble suitable forces to block the person's path of escape. They would then rob the person of his life and all his valuables. In the end, even without Rose's guidance, Han Shuo was able to identify those people who specialized in this trade with just a glance. Along the way to the checkpoint in the Amphilos, Han Shuo would happily purchase a lot of cheap treasures. In his heart, he had the same ulterior motives as those people. Gradually, more and more people followed behind Han Shuo. Not only were there Buzz's and Haralai's subordinates, but also those people whom Han Shuo had purchased goods from. They secretly followed behind Han Shuo and acted as scouts. Outside of the Amphilos, the various forces were busy gathering at the checkpoint where Han Shuo was going to exit. There's a big fat sheep here. Brothers, keep your spirits up. Damn it, that brat has at least a few million black crystal coins in his hands. Just now when Fengji was selling things to him, he took out several big bags of black crystal coins. As long as we kill him, we can rest for a long time. Hey, isn't that Buzz's subordinate? Damn it, how did he receive the news as well? Looks like we're in trouble this time. Ah, Haralai's men are also hiding in the dark. How did that kid offend so many people? Brothers, retreat for the time being. Don't be in a hurry to act. Let's play it by ear. Several forces slowly gathered outside the checkpoint. Many of them were familiar with each other. Each of them wore gloomy expressions as they waited for Han Shuo's group to exit the Amphilos. Lord Haralai, there are already 23 forces coming from all directions. It seems like they are all targeting that group of people. Someone in the dark said in a low voice. Haralai's face turned ugly. He cursed in a low voice, "Lunatic. That guy is really a lunatic. He actually attracted most of the ruthless people in the vicinity. What is that guy trying to do? Even if he wants to die, he shouldn't do this." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.